Good afternoon. Welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting. It's Monday, November 4th. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
President Fay.
Here.
Commissioner Kadikian.
Here.
Jasmine Darian.
Here.
Laurie.
Here.
And Peterson.
Before we get too far into the agenda, we've had a couple of requests to reconsider the order of some of these items. Um, So we'd like to move item 6, the reports and information, ahead of item 5, the action item. But we understand there are some people who have public comments to share on item 5. So if you would like to share your public comment earlier in the meeting without waiting through everything else, we'll invite you to do that after we finish with the staff comments. All right?
Item number 2, consent items. 2A, approval of October 7 meeting minutes.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
I make the motion to approve.
Second.
Any opposition? All right, let's consider those approved.
Item number 3, Glendale Water and Power Commission and staff comments.
Good
Yeah,
afternoon.
Mr. General Manager, why don't you go ahead?
Good afternoon, Manny Robledo, Interim General Manager, Glendale Water and Power. Mr. President and fellow commissioners, it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to report that everything in the distribution systems is operating smoothly, and we haven't had any major issues for the past month. I'd like to report, I handed out a paper version of our power content label that's going to be noted and filed shortly by the City Council. But this shows that our renewable energy is still at 35% for 2023 as compared to the 35% for 2022. And our carbon-free resources actually went down a little bit, and that's because of the water conditions, but our carbon-free resources are 55%. The distinction there is renewable energy is things like solar, wind, landfill biogas, geothermal. Carbon-free are things that do not emit carbon emissions, but they're not considered renewable, like nuclear energy or large hydro. So because of the water conditions in the Colorado River, we received less hydro water, so we had to make it up with purchases. So our renewable resources are producing fine, but we did have to make more purchases, and the purchases are considered generated with fossil fuel, and that's why our carbon-free emissions did drop a little bit. Another thing that affects that is if you have a set amount of renewables and you have load growth, then you have less of a percentage of carbon-free. But it is good news. Our renewables are holding, and we're continuing to add to our renewable portfolio. I'll be providing shortly, at the Commission's request, a detailed presentation of our resources and the cost of those resources and how they contribute to serve the load here in Glendale. As far as our electric system, we've been working with our Building and Safety Department to streamline the way we do permitting. And we've cut out one of the final inspections that we would do, and that's going to save our customers 7 to 10 days in getting their electrical modifications connected. So we're pretty happy with that. It shows cooperation among the departments here at the city. So that's going to be put in place. It's already put in place.
Can you explain how we can cut out an inspection without compromising, safety or level of service?
Of course. The Building and Safety Department is in charge of safety. So what we have is we look at our system and make sure that the location of the new meter is not going to impede our operations. So we have to maintain our easements. So usually the rear property line, there's an easement to allow us to get in and work on the wires and change poles and things like that. And also make sure that it's not going over pools or things like that. But that's on the front end. So the front end, we determine where the meter is and where the service drop is going to go. So it's a matter of coordination with building safety that they ensure that the meter is in the right spot. And the final inspection is not eliminated, it's done by our connection team. So when the connection team goes out and makes a connection, if it's somehow slipped through the cracks, then it'll be caught then, and we won't connect it. The customer would be inconvenienced, but they didn't follow the approved plan. So it does not compromise safety at all, and it saves time, money, etc. So
Great.
we're pleased with it. Okay, as far as water goes, we'll be presenting an update on our master plan for water, recycled water, and infrastructure replacement. Going to City Council is something that we're doing in response to legislation that was passed in 2018 for us to develop usage standards for our customers. For example, they've set a 55 gallon per day per person per capita usage versus just taking our usage and saying, okay, that's it, everybody cut by 10%. This is a more a fair way to do it, where you have actual estimates based on our population, our amount of irrigation that we do for commercial and our industrial use. So that'll be going to City Council. And then finally, we are working on something. It's an enhancement of our low-income care program to take our public benefits dollars and do an increase in the amount of money that helps our low-income customers. And that'll be going to City Council sometime in December. That concludes my general report.
Great, thank you. Any commissioners, any comments or anything you'd like to add at the top of the meeting? Okay.
President Fay, Commission members, good afternoon. If I could report back on your question during last month's meeting regarding the day of the month for the Commission, GWP Commission meetings. So Commission had inquired at last month's meeting whether there was a mandate or whether anything specified that the Commission meetings must be held on a Monday. I checked the charter and the Glendale Municipal Code. Neither one of them specified that it has to be on a day certain. However, the Glendale Municipal Code requires a one-time per month meeting. So the Commission has the option of changing the day of the meeting. Again, that would be based on whether there is availability for the council chambers, staff availability, commission availability, most importantly, GTV6 availability, since we have many boards and commissions. The other option, as we discussed, would be to maintain the first Monday of every month schedule, and then if there's a holiday that falls on a Monday, or if there's a conflict where the commission meeting has to be canceled, the commission can always notice a special meeting for that month. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. I think it would probably be better if we didn't have to make special arrangements. So maybe we can look into what the alternative time slots could be. We can take that offline and maybe try to pick that up in the new year or something.
Cursory look at it. I think Monday is a good day. And there are several holidays that fall on the first Monday. So possibly changing the second Monday would be if all the other, like the TV is available.
Okay. Yeah, let's maybe we can
Would that work
check
for you?
that. We can all check our respective calendars, and if you can check the city resources, that seems probably a pretty low lift change to go from the first Monday to the second Monday. If we can dodge all the holidays, then probably a good way to do that.
Okay, so we will, also, I failed to mention, one of the reports that's coming back about the electric vehicle usage was at the request of the commission, so we'll be providing that report.
Great, looking forward to that. Before we move on to the reports, let's take item 4, general oral communication. So any speakers that would like to speak on items not on the agenda? Do we have any speaker cards? No? Okay. Then let's invite Ms. Vicki Kirschenbaum up to speak on item 5A. We're going to kind of take this a little bit out of order to accommodate everyone's schedules.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. My name's Vicki Kirschenbaum. I am the chair of the Sustainable Burbank Commission, but I'm speaking only on my own behalf this afternoon. I did have a chance to watch your October 7 meeting online, including the presentation by E3. I was very disappointed. I fear E3 was not a good choice to study getting to 10% customer solar and storage by 2027 and additional dispatchable and peak load reduction of 100 megawatts. E3's client list includes 32 investor-owned utilities who oppose rooftop solar as it cuts into their profits. Contracted by the CPUC to look at rooftop solar in California, E3 advised CPUC to go to NEM 3, slashing solar customer benefits. Since NEM 3 took effect, solar installations have fallen 80% statewide, smaller solar companies have folded, and thousands of jobs have been lost. Contrary to what E3 stated at your last meeting, rooftop solar is not the rich making money off the backs of the poor. 60% of California's 2 million solar installations are working and middle-class owners, and only a tiny percentage of people have solar in Glendale, 3.5%. Plenty of wealthy people in Glendale don't have solar. So rich people with solar harming poor people is an industry myth. Rates have not gone up because of rooftop solar, but primarily because of pole and line costs. A 2021 in-depth analysis by Vibrant Clean Energy Modeling found that scaling up utility-scale renewables in conjunction with rooftop solar could be $120 billion cheaper over 30 years than utility scale alone. And of course, rooftop solar cuts pollution, fights global warming, and has public health benefits. Glendale should be doing everything possible to increase local rooftop solar and storage, both customer and utility owned. So I'm asking the Commission not to accept the E3 study as the final answer, but to advocate for incentives for local rooftop solar and storage, advocate for a virtual power plant, advocate for GWP to look for ways to achieve 10% solar and storage and dispatchable and peak load reduction of 100 megawatts, and to support the local resilience and avoided costs and net benefits distributed energy resources can provide.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else here that wanted to speak on, we have a card from Jackie Gish. Would you like to wait until we hear the presentations, or would you like to speak now out of convenience? Okay. All right, just let us know. All right. Okay. And Commissioner Lowry stepped out to recuse himself on the consideration or discussion of item 5A, but we will welcome him back now and go to reports, starting with, let's just go in order, I guess 6A.
All right, well, good evening, President Fay, Commission members, Chisholm Bigolo, Assistant General Manager of Water. As Mr. Robledo mentioned, GWP Water has been working on a number of initiatives, including our Water Master Plan, as well as our cost of service analysis. Okay. So today we will be providing a report. We released an RFP earlier this year in July on both of those entities. Received a number of respondents, and so today we will go over the RFP responses. But before I want to take a moment to talk about why. I will say that this is the first time the city is undertaking an assessment of this magnitude, which is specific to the recycled water. So I just want to talk about why we're doing this now. Next slide, please. Simply put, Los Angeles County, as we know it today, cannot exist without supplemental water. This is a county of over 10 million people, and we average about 14 inches of rainfall a year. So simply not enough water to go around. And when we talk about supplemental water, if we can go to the next slide, we're primarily talking about imported supplies. About 2/3 of Southern California's water supply is imported from other parts of the state and or the country, as shown on this map here. Starting from right to left, we have the Colorado River Aqueduct. This is owned and operated by the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and this imports supplies from the Colorado River watershed. And then we also have the LA Aqueduct. This is owned by LADWP. And this imports its supplies from the Owens River watershed. And then lastly, we have the California Aqueduct. You may know this as the State Water Project, which imports supplies from Northern California. Next slide, please. I will say for the intent of this report, we will only focus on the Colorado River as well as the State Water Project or the California Aqueduct. These are the two imported supplies that impacts Glendale directly. And so starting with the Colorado River, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This, I would say, is worth about 146 feet. That is how much this river, what you're looking at here is Lake Mead. Lake Mead is the most critical reservoir system on the Colorado River, just upstream of the Hoover Dam. And it has decreased about 146 feet in elevation in the 2 decades between 2000 and 2021. And so we oftentimes get inquiries as to why we still impose drought restrictions, although we received quite a bit of rainfall in this past couple of years. There's a couple of things. Number one, just because we receive rainfall here in Southern California, that does not reflect the conditions of where it actually matters, which is our source locations, such as the Colorado River. In addition to that, 1 or 2 consecutive wet years cannot overturn the impact from decades of drought in these critical watersheds. And so we want to be mindful of that. So if we go on to the next slide. Now, with regards to the State Water Project system, Department of Water Resources, they allocate supplies on this system based on what is known as percent allocation. Essentially, when we have favorable hydrology, that equates to a higher allocation amount. And when we say hydrology, we're not just talking about rainfall or how much rainfall we get, but what form do we get that rainfall? Are we getting that rainfall in the form of what we call atmospheric rivers? This is where you get a substantial amount of rainfall in a very short amount of time, leading to excess flooding and making it difficult for us to capture and store that water. But what I want to illustrate on this graphic is that the amount of rainfall that we get from this system has also been on a steady decline, speaking to the unreliability of this system as well. To that point, every 2 years, DWR, they release what is known as a delivery capability report. And that estimates how much water to expect from this system based on hydrological models. They expect that in the next 20 years, we can expect a 25% reduction from this system alone. If we go to the next slide, please. This also has an impact on our groundwater systems. What you're looking at here is the main San Gabriel groundwater basin. This basin is perhaps one of the largest groundwater basins in Southern California. And although we do not operate out of this basin, this typifies conditions for majority of the basins throughout Southern California. And as you can see, for the better part of the past decade, we've been operating well below those 2 red lines. That is known as the line of optimal well production. That is where our wells produce the most amount of water. And so we've been operating well below that line of optimal well production. Next slide, please. And so in addition to all of these challenges, we have to also remember that we live in a seismically active region. We have so many faults here in Southern California and throughout the state of California, the main one being San Andreas Fault. This fault line is estimated to produce at least a 7.8 magnitude earthquake sometime within the next 15 to 30 years, perhaps sooner. What I want to illustrate on this map is that every single one of our imported supplies has a direct crossing to that fault line. And so it's not a matter of if, but when we experience that rupture, we can expect significant disruptions, the likes of which we've never seen before. Next slide, please. And so I like this graphic. It's relatively simple, but tells a compelling story with regards to where we're coming from as far as our water supply, where we are today, and where we're headed. Between 1991 and 2024, we've been able to decrease our dependence on imported supplies primarily through increasing our groundwater and to a smaller extent, our recycled water. The objective of this recycled water master plan is to continue to expand our use of recycled water through 2045. The numbers you're seeing on this graphic for 2045 are conceptual, but they will be informed by the recycled water master plan. Next slide, please. And so while we focus on our water supplies, we certainly cannot neglect our existing infrastructure. Here in Glendale, we operate both the potable and the recycled water system. On the potable side of things, we serve about 37,000 customers through about 400 miles of pipeline. Our pipeline, they're really the backbone of our water system, and over 40% of our pipes were installed close to 80 years ago in the 1950s. And so we have to be able to continue to pay attention to these pipelines and continue with our pipeline rehabilitation program. On the recycled water side of things, we serve about 78 customers through 23 miles of water main. You may hear our water mains for recycled water be referred to as purple pipe. But essentially, the focus and the intent of the recycled water is not necessarily to rehabilitate or replace these infrastructure, but to expand it to the extent possible, and also identify and evaluate opportunities that we can utilize recycled water beyond just irrigation. Next slide, please. And so one of the key items of focus for us as we were putting together this RFP was our ability to engage with the community. We know that we have to engage early and often, and not just community, but also our elected officials. As you can imagine, we deal with highly technical, very complex information. So being able to distill this down into a manner that the public can receive, digest, and allow them to provide meaningful input that can truly advance our initiative is something that's very important to us. In addition to that, we cannot do this alone. And so we have to develop community stakeholders. And so this list is by no means comprehensive, but we do want to target certain businesses and communities within Glendale, starting with the Chamber of Commerce. We feel like this will allow us to target a broad range of businesses as they will be impacted by this cost of service analysis. Also, our educational institutions, GUSD and GCC, being able to extend that partnership to the extent possible. And what you'll realize is GWP, we're not the only ones that are undertaking this assessment. Our neighbors in Burbank, Water and Power, as well as Pasadena, they're also doing these types of assessments to diversify local supplies. So if there are opportunities to partner with them, we will be looking to do so, as well as other municipal water agencies such as Foothill and Crescenta Valley Water District. Next slide, please. And so, as mentioned, we received a number of respondents for the proposals. What you're seeing here is the respondents for the recycled and the infrastructure assessment. Although those are two separate deliverables, we have bundled this up as to be completed by one consultant. And so we received proposals from Arcadis and CDM Smith. They ranged in price from just above $1.1 million to just under $2 million. The bottom table there enumerates the evaluative criteria that were used to score these proposals. So this was not just something that was based on cost alone, but we did have a scoring committee made up of folks from not just administration, but also engineering, finance, water quality. We wanted to make sure that we captured all aspects of this. And based off of that scoring, our recommendation to proceed will be with Arcadis for this initiative. Next slide, please. And so similarly, for the cost of service analysis, we received a total of 5 respondents, which ranged in price from $180,000 to about $450,000. And again, utilizing the same evaluative criteria, we are recommending to proceed with Raftelis for this. Next slide, please. And so this table summarizes the fiscal impact. As mentioned, for the water system analysis, that came out to about $1.19 million. The water cost of service analysis, about $235,000. And we also wanted to include contingency. This is a significant undertaking, and we do expect some unforeseen issues or matters that we have to deal with. So we have a 10% contingency of about $143,000. And so the total estimated project cost is about $1.57 million, which I do want to mention that is something that is budgeted in the fiscal year 24-25. Next slide, please. And so that concludes the presentation, and this is our recommendation, is to endorse GWP's proposed City Council to authorize the PSA with Arcadis for the cost of service analysis, as well as Raftelis for the cost of service analysis and water system master plan. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Great to get that information, and it's nice to have a regular reminder just how fragile and dependent our system is on these external forces. Commissioners, any questions for the Assistant General Manager? No questions. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. I think that this was a great presentation. Thank you very much. And I agree wholeheartedly that we need to look at more sustainable supplies for the city of Glendale. And recycled water is a perfect opportunity to move forward with that, make sure that we are optimizing as much of the wastewater stream as we're able to, and deliver it to our customers and get off of imported water. So very impressed, and also very excited to work with you on this in the future.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay.
One question. So with regards to, I think it was slide 13 or 14, where it was the water cost of service analysis, there was the 5 different, yeah, that one. So why is there such a huge price change between the first one of 180,000 and the other one 450,000?
Right, we can attribute that to a number of things. We were very clear and concise, and we had a very comprehensive RFP. I will say one of the things that we focused on was community outreach and engagement. You know, some consultants really placed their resources in certain aspects of the RFP, certain tasks associated with the RFP. And so it really just depends on, the amount of resources they're placed. And so we wanted to make sure that those resource placements actually are something that we were looking for in terms of what will be, the final product. So it really just depends. There's not a single answer for why certain consultants have more resources allocated to certain tasks versus others.
Okay. All right.
So you mentioned that the rain that falls here in Glendale or in the metro area here is not sufficient to meet our needs, and I think that it's important to note that there is a lot of rain that falls here, and we use almost none of it. And so as we're thinking about recycled water and all these big infrastructure solutions, we should make sure we are trying to maximize what water we do get here. Not only is it a missed opportunity, but it's a source of pollution, stormwater flowing to the ocean. I know that's really more the ambit of the Public Works Department for our stormwater compliance, but it's two sides of the same coin. So is stormwater capture part of any of this scope of work? Is that connected to the recycled water study?
Absolutely. I will say as part of this, we do plan on partnering with Public Works as well as other departments here within the city to identify to what extent we can capture the stormwater, what projects do we need to initiate, things of that nature, and potential opportunities to partner with, really LADWP determines that they own the stormwater that falls here within the valley. So being able to work with them to see what makes sense. I know some of these decrees were developed, in the 70s. Are they still relevant, and to what extent? So that is part of this plan.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you're willing to question that. The city of Los Angeles isn't doing anything useful with the rain that falls in Glendale either. So if we're all just wasting it and letting it become pollution in the sea, anyone who can get a bucket and capture some of it ought to do that, I think. So I think you'd have our support to go forward and check and see if those agreements still apply or might have some flexibility. As we look at the cost of service, we may have another opportunity to see the results or the interim products of that analysis. But just before we set off on it, is something that will be assessed. Maybe the question is, what is our cost for pumping water uphill? Right, we have a big difference in pressure zones and elevations in Glendale. How important is that to our delivered cost of water to customers?
Well, that will depend, and that is something that we're going to look at as part of that COSA is whether we should impose what we call elevation cost. That's cost of pumpage between pressure zones. And how much of a difference is that really? How much cost are we actually talking? And so that is something that will come out of this assessment. But ultimately, we're looking at the cost. If you're asking if I may ask for a clarifying question, are you asking about the cost of imported water versus the cost of
In
groundwater?
this
or-
particular case, I was thinking about the idea of fairness, that some customers who live higher up on the hill, you know, the city may be paying to pump
Right.
water up to them. And similar with the discussion about solar, and we're trying to minimize the degree to which some of our customers are subsidizing other customers. It seems like it's kind of in the same vein. So we don't need an answer right now, but if you can have that included as one of the things the consultant looks at, maybe it's a de minimis cost and the energy's not that significant in the grand scheme of things. Maybe it is significant. So that would be, I'd be curious to see that.
That is included in our assessment, and that is something that we will bring back to this commission before decision is made.
Great, okay. And do you happen to know what is the current cost that we pay per unit of water, whether it's per acre foot or whatever other unit from Metropolitan Water District for those imported water sources?
Yes, currently it's about 13,000. Well, currently it's 1,200 per acre feet, but it is slated to go up by 11%. So for us, that's going to equate to about 1,300 or 1,400 per acre feet. So 1,400 per acre feet.
Is that 11% like over the next 10 years or?
That's 11% over the next year, and another 11% the subsequent year.
Okay. So at that rate, it's going to be $2,000 an acre foot, you know, pretty soon, right? So how does that factor into what we determine is a good value or a good cost of alternatives to buying water from Metropolitan?
Well, correct. I think cost implications are a big factor. But also, we also have to look at the really the cost of reliability and resiliency. I think it's a cost that we also have to consider. The idea here is not to entirely be independent of Metropolitan. I think we will always be dependent on Metropolitan. But to be able to have the latitude to balance that so that during extremely dry years, we're not subjugated to water and restrictions like we've seen in the past couple of years. And so really, I think the key is finding what that balance is. You know, you are going to have an additional cost for recycled water. It's not cheap. Recycled water is not cheap. Is there a point in time in the future where that cost may equate the cost of imported water? Possibly. You know, that's something we'll also take a look at. But I do also want us to just be mindful of the fact that it may be worth it to pay more for resiliency and for diversity in our water portfolio.
And an investment in recycled water is what, a 30, 40, 50-year time horizon?
Certainly, yes.
So,
Yes.
you know, at 11, if it keeps going up 11% a year in 50 years, that's going to be very expensive purchased water. So the degree to which we can own our own destiny and kind of control our future, that's part of this study.
Absolutely.
Great, very good.
I'd like to say something. Metropolitan, one of the reasons for the increase is they're exploring recycled water as well. So there's a Carson plant where the water right now goes to the ocean, and they're going to invest in, I don't know if it's approved yet, but the plan is to pump that water back up to Orange County into the San Gabriel Valley to percolate it down and then spreading ground so that it becomes part of the groundwater system. So one of the reasons for the 11% increase is that they're seeking out new sources of supply.
I will say, just a point of clarification, that cost is actually not included currently in that increase. That cost is to be determined in terms of how we're going to capture that cost and how it's going to be functionalized. So as we currently stand, it's not included in the 22% over the course of the next 2 years.
Yeah, and that's to your point. It's going to go up. However, I think the plan that we're going to look at is a distribution system so that we can utilize potable water that's produced and get it to the golf courses and the parks and things like that. So that's part of our plan, is for the distribution of the recycled water.
That's great. Yeah, I think it would be helpful for us as a commission. As you said, this is all pretty technical, but if we can try to distill it down to that kind of cost per acre foot, if we can use that consistently as a benchmark, I think that would certainly help me compare the options of, you know, we can build a big water recycling plant, it'll cost this much, or we can buy water from these guys, it'll cost this much. So, and then the recycled water plan, does that also include looking at new potential customers and users
Correct.
as we extend the Purple Pipe network?
Certainly. Yeah, I know we will be looking at not just external customers and users, but internal. I know we have several parks within the city that can use recycled water for green spaces and irrigation. But also when we start talking about utilizing recycled water beyond irrigation, that really opens up a new customer base that we can apply that to. And so that is what we'll be looking for as well.
Right, and to the extent some of those biggest users might be other government agencies that share our kind of civic-minded approach to making this a sustainable city, that's maybe a good place to start. And I think a lot of our customers are people who just live in Glendale. They don't really make a big distinction between, well, that's the Water and Power Department, and that's the Parks Department, and that's the schools. It's all just the city, right?
Correct.
So I know it's easy for us to get stuck in our silos, but let's try to think a bigger picture, and if there's anything we can do as community leaders to help bridge those gaps, please let us know. All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Now we'll move to 6B, average energy cost.
Sorry, before we move, President, was there a recommendation or something requested from this commission? The last slide says recommendations and endorse GWP proposed recommendation to City Council. So are you guys asking us for some action item or not?
Right, so really the action item is to endorse our recommendation for the study, the COSA, as well as the master plan to City Council next month.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion along those lines?
I'll make a motion that,
President Fay, commission members, this item isn't agendized as an action item like action item 5B, where the commission can make a formal recommendation via a motion. However, if the commission is desirous of endorsing the program and what was presented to the commission can make that statement on the record, and staff can include it in the council report to the city council, or make that presentation or representation to the city council that the commission did in fact endorse what was presented to it.
Okay. Maybe we each say whether or not we endorse this, and that will be noted for the record.
I endorse this moving forward with the master plan and the COSA.
I endorse the same as well, and my endorsement does not involve who are going to be the consultants. City Council can pick that, but just the general idea that we need this, it's important, that's my endorsement.
I agree it's important, and I endorse the recommendations.
I also endorse the recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Robledo, would you like to present 6B, average energy cost?
Yes. This is something inquired about last meeting from the commission. So we prepared the average energy cost of each one of our resources. First slide, please. So we'll start with the local resources. Grayson Power Plant is here in town at 5 and the 134. And we only have one unit remaining there. That's the newest unit. It's a gas turbine peaking plant. And last year, it ran about 9% of its capability. And that's to serve the peak days when we need energy, and our imports are somewhat at capacity, so we would run it. It's not the most efficient unit. A combined cycle like Magnolia, for example, we'll see in a different slide, that's in Burbank. It's made to run continuously. This unit's made to run when we need it, and it uses more gas than a unit like the Magnolia plant, but also the units that we're building, the Wärtsilä engines are more efficient. Those are made to run as much as we need them. But it's a good plant, and it provides approximately 50 megawatts. And with the number you see here, 103, is including the new facilities to be built. That's why we included both 2024 and 2027, because we wanted to show what's happening now, or what's happening for the last fiscal year, 2024, and what we expect in 2027. So if you can see the cost there, the cost per unit is quite high. That's about 60 cents, and that's because it doesn't run very much, but there's fixed costs we have to maintain it, and we have to keep it available. However, it's a very critical part of our resources, because it's there when we need it. And that's why we have this column called reliability. It is a reliable plant that we can count on. It's dispatchable. unlike some of the renewable energy that is subject to wind or availability is intermittent. Similarly, the biogas plant that's being built should be available sometime next year. It's going to take the waste gas from the landfill and turn it into electricity. So it's kind of a twofer. You can destroy the methane that is harmful to the environment. It's being destroyed now with the flare, but you can, instead of wasting that heat, you can utilize that heat in the form of electricity. But because the fuel is a waste product, and because the land is owned by the city, it's very inexpensive. So that's about 6.4 cents. One thing about the Grayson plant, with the new engines, the price is going to go down because we expect to run those engines more so than just the Unit 9. They are more efficient and they'll be running more. So the way the economics works for power plants is the more you use it, your denominator grows and your cost per unit of energy decreases. So the goal is to, if you do build something, this is the same economics for factories. You have the law of diminishing returns, right? You want to use it as much as possible, and then you get lower cost per unit of energy. That's how we bill most of our customers, is cost per unit of energy. So this is a comparison of how that measures up. For customer solar, the cost is it's an avoided cost. So basically, someone who owns solar doesn't pay us for the energy that they produce, but they don't pay for the distribution costs. They don't pay for the generation costs. So the cost of the utility, or the negative cost, is about 30 cents. So it's actually more than we would pay for the local resource, and it's not a reliable resource because it's dependent on weather, and it doesn't really match our peak because it'll peak early afternoon when we need it, peaking at 4 to 5 p.m. Now, distributed energy resource is a little bit cheaper because we generally put those on city property, and you're just paying for the facilities. So that comes in at about 13 cents. And I failed to note, at the bottom shows that our total average of our system resources is 12 cents. So to the extent a resource is above 12 cents, that means it's making the average worse. And to the extent it's below 12 cents, it's making it better. So I would say that the distributed energy resource solar, like the one at the sports complex and the brand landfill, those are coming in around 13 cents. Next slide, please. One thing I would note, local resources amount about 18% of our portfolio. So now we get into purchased energy. So we have a power plant in Utah called Intermountain Power Plant, and we bring that in over high voltage lines. Right now, it produces about 75 megawatts of capacity, or about 79 gigawatt hours of energy. After it's rebuilt, it's going through a change. It's changing from coal to natural gas, which is going to clean it up. It's going to produce less greenhouse gas. We expect to run it more because right now it's running primarily in the summer months because we're trying to minimize the amount of greenhouse gas. So once we change it to natural gas, we'll be running it more, and it's going to go up from 5% to a higher percentage of production. And the price will stay about the same, about 9.5 cents now. It's going to go to about 11 cents. And the reason it goes up a little bit is because there's a lot of facilities to be paid for. So you have debt to pay off. But it is relatively inexpensive increase, but it's a modest increase for the amount of benefit we get for it. We are doing a study of hydrogen for that facility, but we have not committed to the hydrogen at this point. But it is a possibility that a percentage of that energy would not only be natural gas, but it also be from hydrogen. Then we get into Palo Verde Nuclear. This is a long-standing contract, produces about 5% of our energy. And it's a very, very low price of 5 cents. And that's because it's capitalized and it's just paying for the operation and maintenance of the facility. And that's a carbon-free facility where it's not renewable, but it doesn't produce greenhouse gases. Hydro, as was shown in the picture, the water resource is lesser, but even so, you can count on it to be there when you need it. And we can run it less, but we still have enough to meet our peak demand. Last year, we got 3% of our energy from there. And it's very, very low. It's about 7 cents. Magnolia is a good resource. We're getting about 18% of our energy from there, about 10 cents. And just know that all these are less than our average, and that's why our average is about 12 cents. And then we do buy from the market to fill in, because we have excess transmission, and we can buy from the northwest, and we can buy from the southwest, and we bring it in and import it into Glendale. And that's about 12 cents is what the market is. We get about 49% of our resources from purchased energy like this. And then finally, we have our renewable resources. Next slide, please. So these are the external resources. I talked about the internal solar, the customer-owned, and the distributed energy that we own. These are outside. So Pebble Springs is a wind project. We're getting about 3% of our energy from there. Tieton is hydro, about 1%. Whitegrass is geothermal, about 1%. Star Peak is geothermal, about 3%. Townside is solar, but it's only 55% solar because it's augmented with natural gas. And then Eland is a little bit more reliable because it's married with a battery system, so that we can actually shift the output to when we need it, and actually bundle it so it comes in more, uses our transmission more efficiently with the battery. So it's a good fit for that. And all these are reasonably priced. The Tieton is higher because of the water conditions, and we have to take a run of the river. That's a distinction between a renewable hydro and a non-renewable hydro. It's been deemed that, like the Hoover project, caused a lot of environmental concerns by creating dams and things like that. So large hydro is not considered qualified renewable. But this project, because it's run of the river, generates power whenever the river is running, it is considered renewable. This shows 33%, but last year it was 35%. So it just depends on, this projection is going out by 2027, and we plan on adding additional resources inside Glendale and outside of Glendale. One of the things we're looking at to keep all of the new resources being carbon-free or renewable is we're looking at our import capabilities, both to Glendale and maybe some other alternatives to increase the amount of capacity we have through Los Angeles, to give us access to more renewable resources out of the Glendale area. That in combination with our customer-owned solar and also the projects that we're doing here. And you'll hear from the E3 presentation that we're also looking at doing power purchase agreements with customers who have an opportunity to do that. Maybe it's not the owner, maybe it's an independent purveyor of electricity, and they can pay an owner to put facilities on their property and have some kind of mechanism to make revenue from selling solar energy to the department. And again, that'll be more. And one thing I would like to say about the E3 presentation is that we have accepted the findings of E3, but we've, as a department, made some recommendations that we think are best for our city and the community. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have a public comment card from Ms. Gish on item 6B. Why don't you come up, and then we can give the commissioners a chance to ask questions.
Yes, so most of what I'm going to be doing is asking questions too. The ward sales can't run full-time. They're only allowed to run 13%, as I recall, from their permit, because then when they passed city council, that was part of the recommendation. And I believe that their permits exclude them from running for more than 13% of the time because of the greenhouse gases. I didn't see batteries on the list of local resources, yet the batteries are supposed to come online soon, I hope, but they're not on the list at all. So I would think that would be a local resource that should be counted on the list. They can definitely decrease that peak that we're all worried about in the late afternoons in the summertime. The costs for maintenance, the cost for interest, I mean, one of the reasons our electrical rates, or the reason our electrical rates is skyrocketing the way it is the costs for Grayson and Shoal. And the cost for that interest goes on and on and on, and doesn't seem to be counted very much in the cost sheet. While I thought that one of the ones that we're purchasing, the costs are higher because they're paying for facility costs. Well, aren't we paying for facility costs too for Grayson and Shoal? And shouldn't those costs be on that sheet as well? Also transmission costs. So all the stuff that's coming in on the transom get transmission and distribution costs associated with that, while the local resources, those costs should be much less. So those were a combination of questions and comments. The very first of those slides, the local resource one, is very confusing to me because maybe you could
put it back. Local resource?
Yeah, local resources. So Shoal isn't running, so it's not providing any amount of power right now.
That's a 2027 figure.
Well, the DER solar also ought to be some amount of power in 2027, and it's zero there. So
I'd be
I
happy
think
to
that- yeah.
take the comment, then I'll respond.
Yeah, just on that one, I think that the label DER solar maybe is a little misleading. That was meant to be like department-developed solar projects, right? That
yeah,
are
but some of
in the
those are
city of
supposed to come
Glendale.
online next year. I mean,
It stands for Distributed Energy Resources, yeah.
but
these-
but you're counting the solar on city-owned property, right? In that
That's
category.
That's what that is.
But some of those are supposed to be online next year. So if this is a 2027 column, then that shouldn't be zero. So I don't know. I was looking through these slides and going, I don't understand. I don't understand. So that's hence a bunch of questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think maybe just to have the staff touch on a couple of those things. How do we think of batteries? You know, batteries are not generating electricity, they're storing it. Do we think of them as a resource? Is it some other kind of asset?
They're a capacity resource. They don't generate energy. The resident was correct, Ms. Gish was correct, that they will help with our peak, but they don't generate energy.
And that's why they're not listed on any of these charts, right?
And is it okay if I respond to
Yeah, please.
the question? The 14%, Grayson shows that 9%, and 9% is less than 14%. So it is within the permit. So we are aware of the permit limitations. And that's the reason, frankly, that's the reason it's 26 cents, is because of that permit limitation. If you were to let it run, then it would be more like Magnolia. Can you switch to Magnolia, please? If you were to let it run, it'd be more in the 10-cent range. But because it's restricted and you have fixed dollar amount, and the debt service for the bonds is included in here, so when you allocate $180 million to the engines and $400 million to the battery, these are the unit costs you get. You can move back to
Great, yeah, that was another question I wanted to.
So the reason it's so high, it's 26 cents, when our average is 12 cents, is because of the debt service and because we can't run it.
And so just to clarify something, you mentioned the cost of the batteries at the repowered Grayson, that's all bundled in and that's reflected in this unit cost of electricity, or those are excluded?
No, this is, we did not show the battery here. So aside from these resources, we have the battery resource, which is a reliability resource. And it makes up for the unreliable renewable. So they combine, and then you have something that does work. So we plan on utilizing it to its full extent. The battery will help us manage our loads. So there may be an opportunity to reduce the amount of money we pay Los Angeles as a balancing authority, because once that's in service, then we can meet our needs more fully and maybe reduce the amount we can use there. There's an opportunity to buy low-priced energy when it's available, and then offset higher-priced energy. So we plan on fully utilizing the battery. It's just not a resource to be shown here.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. Commissioners, are there any other questions about this presentation on the average energy costs?
Just one more point.
Sure.
We did include debt service, and we did include transmission costs. We allocated all the transmission costs to each one of the resources, and that's why they're shown there. And the 2027, if it goes into service in 2026, it will be in service in 2027.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Any comments here?
As far as maintenance costs on these items, are they included?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely.
I'll say I really appreciate that you have given us a all-inclusive, simple cost metric that we can use for comparison.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, whether it's on the water side or the power side. All of these things are very complicated, a lot of moving parts. So figuring out a way to reduce them into a number that we can use for comparison, I think is really important. So thank you.
I think it's a good management tool, good resource planning tool. I would like to say something about net energy metering. You're going to hear from our recommendation that we are not recommending action on net energy metering. We acknowledge, and I said we accept the findings of the E3 report, that it is somewhat, it provides benefits to the participants at the expense of the benefits to the non-participants. So we think eventually, for equity, it needs to be phased out. But to support the goals and not to reduce the momentum, we've had tremendous momentum of solar on customers' homes. At this point, we're not recommending changing that. And we have set a limit, because if everyone had solar, you know, we'd have to change our business model. So it would not work, but it'll work. Our recommendation is up to 60 megawatts, and you'll hear.
I look forward to covering that. We'll come back to that in just a second, because I want to make sure we're mindful of the recusal and other comments. So I think that concludes our presentation.
I'd be happy to answer questions.
6B, are there any other questions on this one, 6B?
No, I don't have questions, but I do thank you for this presentation. It kind of sums it up in simple numbers, saying this much cents per kilowatt is very beneficial and the average that we have, which is about 12 cents. So somebody or public in general, when they're looking at the cost, if it's below 12 cents, it's a good deal. It's above 12 cents, it's expensive, but maybe good reason for it. Reliability, need when you need it in the summers, that's such. So I think it provides a good tool and kind of rules of thumb for the public in general to kind of see and understand and make quick understanding of this thing. So thank you for this report.
Thank you.
I concur. Very good report. It simplifies things very much. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll move to item 6C, the American Public Power Association Smart Energy Provider Designation.
Good afternoon, President Fay, members of the Commission. Brian Salazar, Business Transformation Manager. I have two items today. The first one is, excuse me, I'd love to share with the Commission that Glendale Water and Power was recently recognized at the national level for the APPA, American Public Power Association Clean or Smart Energy Provider designation. So the Smart Energy Provider, next slide, please. Thank you. Smart energy provider recognizes a commitment to 4 pillars, including energy efficiency, distributed generation, renewable energy, and environmental initiatives, all which also have a component of customer service. And APPA has approximately 2,000 public utilities as memberships across the country. And as of this award that was presented last week on Monday, there are 111 utilities that have gained this recognition for Smart Energy Provider. Glendale has been a part of this program for the past 3 cycles. It used to be 2 years. The most current cycle is going to be for 3 years. So this designation is honored for the next 3 years, 24 through 27. I will note that in the presentation, next slide, please. I will note that in the presentation, this shows 97, so it increased by 14 in this last round. Obviously, this presentation was presented before we were able to announce the awardees in this latest round. And I will also add that joining our local California public utilities are our neighbors in Burbank, Pasadena, and Colton, who were not originally on the list, but they've joined us in this recognition. So I'm happy to share with the commission that we've got this plaque recognizing our commitment to the smart energy provider and our customers.
Great, thank you. Congratulations to all the staff who worked to make this happen, commissioners for being part of this, and I think also to the city council and everyone in Glendale who's put the political momentum behind these initiatives and putting us in this position. So everyone give yourself a round of applause. Come on, Mr. Mellon, you too. Are there any questions about this award or the qualifications?
Well, I had some questions with regards to that. So just to put things in perspective, in California, at least I saw 6, or maybe a couple more had been added, so maybe it's 9 at this point. Out of how many power generators or utilities are in California that only 6 had been recognized? I just want to see how well are we standing up. There's a total of 20 and there's 6, so we're halfway through, or how many are the total utilities in California, would you say?
Great question, Mr. Kadicki. And I don't have that answer for you of public utilities that have participated in this from California, but I can get that for you.
Okay.
Out of the total country, there's 2,000.
So 2,000 and only 111, I think, received this award. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we're in the top 10, 20, 5%? We're in the top 5%.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't get the credit of the work what we're trying to do, but I think we're standing up pretty well, at least based on those numbers. Maybe better in California, I don't know. Anyways, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Salazar, would you like to proceed with the next item?
Sure, but before I do, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the team members that contributed to this. I didn't mention that before. So team members in public works, in public benefits, marketing, customer service, power management, and business support. They're the ones that really make this effort happen. So recognition to them.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay. So moving on, the next item I have is electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So to address one of the questions that came up in last month's commission meeting, I will get to that very shortly about utilization, but I wanted to open the discussion just talking about the Low Carbon Fuel Standards Program, which is part of California Air Resources Board. It was approved by CARB in 2009 and was designed to reduce GHG emissions in the transportation sector. We can go to the next slide, please. So the transportation sector is responsible for about 50% of greenhouse gas emissions, about 80% of ozone-forming gas emissions, and about 95% of diesel particulate matter. So LCFS program is basically what funds all of our transportation electrification goals. So EV rebates, it funds our electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which is what this presentation is about, e-bike rebates, and then also EV charging rebates for our residential and commercial customers. So GWP started participating in this program in 2017. In 2023 alone, we generated about 25,000 credits, and credits are earned based on Glendale EV registrations. I'll get into more about those numbers here in a little bit. The credit value is equivalent to 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalent. The current total credit value that we have in the bank is approximately 4.6 million. We have about 77,000 credits that we have available to sell. And as of year to date, or life to date actually, we've sold just under 40,000 credits for a total of 5.2 million. The current value of the credits is about 60. The credits that we've sold in the past, in 21, 22, and 23, were average value at about 132. There's some legislation coming through later this year that could improve the price for us, so we're holding on until that point, but we will be selling more soon. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this is kind of a table of contents of what you should expect. I already covered the low carbon fuel, but I'm going to go over our EV charging program and our statistics. Next, I'll move on to our ZEV, zero emission vehicle adoption in Glendale. I'll go by zip code, and then I'll cover EV chargers by zip code as well. And then I'll move on to quickly through our EV project pipeline and recap or finish with our rebate statistics, EV rebate statistics. Okay, next slide, please. So our city-owned EV charging program contains 10 separate locations for a total of 78 ports. 74 level 2s and 4 DC fast chargers. We started this project back in 2016 with our first couple chargers, and in 23 and 24 alone, we added 59 additional ports. Next slide, please. So this slide addresses the utilization question that was asked during the last commission. So what I have is 2 colored bars, so you can see it goes from the top utilization at the city hall. So there's 7.8 hours average that those chargers are utilized. And as you go down the list, you'll see that there's some lighter shaded areas on the outside. So the lighter shaded areas include the charging utilization while the chargers are in operation. The darker shaded shows the difference between when those chargers are not in operation. So some of those are significant impact. For example, you can see the marketplace has a big discrepancy between 5.6 when they're in operation and probably around 2 when they're not in operation. That's attributed to one of the chargers belonging to a company that went insolvent. They're in the process of being bought by another Indian company, but that's been down. We haven't been able to get parts. So it's just kind of an explanation of why you see that discrepancy. But
So
overall,
just to put that in really simple terms, the difference between the darker color and the lighter color is the uptime of the unit?
that's correct. Yeah.
Right. Maybe you can explain by, as an example, Broadview curbside, for example. There's 6.8 dark, and then there's lights on the side.
Yep. So the operational uptime or the operational utilization of that charger is 6.8 hours per day.
Mm-hmm.
The darker bar is the operation or is the utilization when the unit has periods of downtime. So it's a little bit less. In that case, it would be roughly like 6.2.
Okay.
So the number that I'm showing in the middle is the operational utilization. So when the units are in operation, that's how many hours a day average that they're being utilized.
I see. And City Hall seems to be having no issues. It's running and it's constantly available.
It's had a couple issues, but we were able to get those back up
So,
pretty quickly.
okay, so
it's
that's one
marginal.
way of kind of interpreting where there's no shades on the sides and it's just one solid.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this is a good tool to identify areas that are getting high utilization and planning out the next series of projects.
I think I asked for this, but I don't know if I recall.
Next slide, please. Okay, so this just shows some statistics on our chargers. So DC chargers represent four chargers out of the 78. We have 74 level 2 chargers. So out of the total, the DC chargers represent 5% of our total charging network. Level 2s are 95%. Now, when you look at the energy dispense in the middle pie chart, when you look at the energy dispense, you see a different story. So the DC chargers are representing 38% of the total energy dispensed, whereas level 2 is 62%. And you take it one step further and look at the revenues on the right-hand side. The revenues generated from the DC fast charger, 4 of them represent 53% to total revenues, and level 2 represent 47%. It kind of tells a good story on what's the most popular charger, and gives us confirmation that we do need a lot more DC fast chargers. 5% is representing 38% of the power and 53% of the total revenues. Next slide, please. This slide shows our total energy dispensed by month for this year. And you can see the total dispense between level 2 and level 3 in January was around 57,000 kilowatt hours. And already in September, we're at 102,000 kilowatt hours. So we're trending to double where we were at the beginning of the year by the end of the year on a monthly basis. So remember that 102,000 kilowatt hour numbers. Next slide, please. If you look at 2022, that entire year alone, we distributed or dispensed about 115,000 kilowatt hours. So we're trending to match that towards the end of this year on a monthly basis than what we had just 2 years ago in 2022. So you can see the significant growth. The orange line represents how many chargers we had during those years. So you can see that if we build it, they will come. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to shift here. And what this slide is showing is the ZEV, or zero emission vehicle adoption in Glendale since 2013. One notable year I'd like to point out is 2020. So the purple bar represents battery electric, the light blue represents the plug-in hybrid, and the fuel cell represents, the orange represents fuel cell. So if you look at 2020, you can see that battery electric and plug-in hybrid were neck and neck, right, a little over 2,100 units each. But since then, battery electric vehicles have far surpassed the adoption rate of any other ZEV in the city. As of December of 2023, that's when CEC updates their registration counts, we had just under 12,000 ZEVs. Next slide, please. So when we compare ourselves to LA County in California as far as percentage of adoption based on total vehicles, we are at, in the purple, 7.7%. LA County's at, in the blue, 5.7%. And then California in the gold or yellow is at 5.2%. Now, when we look at the more closer market in our neighbors, with our neighbors, next slide, please, thank you. Glendale's again in the purple at 7.7% adoption. Burbank in the blue is at 7%, and Pasadena in red is at 8.8%. Next slide, please. So I'm going to shift gears a little here, and what I'm going to show you here is the ZEV population by zip code. So the numbers on the map represent each, and the different colors represent each zip code, and that's how many ZEVs are in each of those zip codes. Now, what I did on that little table there is I included the population of each zip code, the resident population, and then the percentage of that resident population for the total, as well as the ZEV population, and drew a comparison in the red squares. So you can see that the resident population in most of those, except for the highlighted yellow ones, are very close to the ZEV adoption. So up on top, you've got 4 and 3, next line down, 10 and 9, 11 and 11. The exception are the highlighted ones. So when you look at 91205 right there in the middle, the percent of the population, resident population, is 17% of the total Glendale population, whereas the ZEV adoption is 11. And then the two at the bottom are kind of reversed. So the resident population is a lower number than the ZEV adoption. That tells us that in those lower income areas that are down in like the Adams Square area, ZEV adoption's less. And what we look at that, what that tells us is there might be more of a need for public EV charging infrastructure than in areas where the ZEV adoption is higher in like single family areas. A lot of information on this, but the color is intended to just show a trend of ZEV adoption since 2016. So you can see that in the four colors represent 0 to 4%. The lightest color, the light green, is 5 to 10%. The darker green is 11 to 20%. But it shows a very solid trend that ZEV adoption in those zip codes has remained pretty consistent throughout the last 8 years. Okay, so what this map does is it shows the ZEV adoption by zip code. And then what I've done here is in the middle, we show where our electric vehicle charging infrastructure is located, all 78 chargers that are city-owned. In the blue shows the non-city owned but publicly available electric chargers. So those would be like commercial chargers, apartment chargers that are open to the public. There's some Tesla chargers are included in that as well. So we have 78 city-owned, and then non-city-owned open to the public include 193. Next slide, please. We currently have 35 projects in various phases of the design and plan review process. Sports complex is actually in construction and will be operational within the next month. Maple Park and Palmer Park are permitted and will be starting soon. And then GCC Lot 34, Shoal Canyon Golf Course, and Fremont Park are in the early stages of the plan and design phase. So what is the future of our EVSE infrastructure? I don't think I clarified. EVSE stands for Electric Vehicle System Equipment. So given the complexities and costs associated with EVSE ownership, we are exploring a couple different ways forward. So one is to solicit an RFP for the EVSE ownership, which is what we currently have done, which includes design, permitting, procurement, construction, maintenance, networking, and payment collection, which is a lot. And then the other is to solicit an RFP for a private company to install, own, and operate publicly accessible EVSE in a type of like licensing agreement with the city. Next slide, please. So as we continue to look at locations to install EVSE equipment, these are some curbside locations that we feel would be good locations. They represent about 26 locations throughout the city. And I'll quickly go through each of these locations. Next slide. One location is up on Foothill. It's next to a shopping center. Curbside there would be very ideal. There's very little infrastructure up in that area, which is the 91214 zip code. Next slide, please. Trader Joe's up in Montrose would be another great location. Most of the times I'm up there, there's an EV parked along the street in the parking lot. There's always an opportunity to provide electric vehicle infrastructure. In fact, the car on the left is an EV. Next slide, please. This is also in Montrose. There's a public parking facility there on Wickham Way. Next slide, please. Also in Montrose, there's opportunities within those shopping areas along the street on Ocean View. Thank you. This is further south on Ocean View. Another great opportunity. Also in Montrose, we have some great locations up at Montrose Community Park, over by the ball fields and by the tennis courts. And then further down into closer to the city center, we have Chevy Chase Medical Center. A couple ideal locations there. You can see there's plenty of parking for the facility, so curbside would be an ideal location to install some chargers there. Also in Adams Square. Stalker Village, a couple locations there by that shopping center, curbside. And Pelincone Park. Next slide. And I think last but not least, Kenneth Village. Great opportunity. There's very little infrastructure up there in this adjacent to this shopping center, which would be ideal. Okay. So when we look at how we're performing in regards to providing public infrastructure for charging access, we like to, industry kind of has a standard of identifying a ratio of how many ZEVs you have to how many chargers. California's currently at a ratio of 33. 33 vehicles, electric vehicles to every charger installed. When we look at our current infrastructure with our pipeline, adding it 35 additional to our 78, that puts us at 113, which puts our ratio at 103 of city-owned. Now, if we take into consideration the 193 chargers that are publicly available but privately owned, that brings our ratio down to 38. And by zip code, you can see how well we're performing in some areas and some areas where you can definitely see some opportunities. For example, for Dugo City, 91214, the ratio is currently at 370. Next slide, please. So then this does question how well are those areas represented. So when we look at our electric vehicle charger rebate program, we can see that the total program we've provided 479 rebates since 2017, which account for 618 charging ports, which is significant. So when you look at that from a percentage basis of the total EVs out there, you can see that we've gone from 2017 to 0.4% to currently we're at 5.4%. Actually, I would say we're at 3.8% because those numbers are going to update in December. So that 11,434 of just battery electric vehicles is going to increase once we get that new data from CEC. So we're currently sitting at about 4%. So you'll recognize the map on the left with the ZEV adoption by zip code. And what we have here in the middle is a residential rebated or incentivized ports by zip code, and then the commercial ports by zip code. So total residential ports we've incentivized are 465, and total commercial ports we incentivized are 153. Now, when we compare our ratio to the rest of our neighbors in California, as I mentioned, California's ratio is at 33, LA County's at 93, Glendale, including the work in progress, is at 38, Burbank's at 22, and Pasadena is at 19. So next steps include the RFPs that I mentioned earlier for city-owned maintenance and network, RFP for private EVSE development, continuing the permitting process and construction for our current pipeline projects, and continue to enhance community outreach for EV charger rebates. As you saw in that rebate slide, 3.8% shows us we can probably reach more people to take advantage of our rebates. And then to continue evaluating city-owned facilities for level 2 and level 3 EV charger installations. I'm happy to take any questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, could we go back to slide 16, please? I just want some clarifications on that. So the path forward, the first one was solicit RFPs for continued ownership. That's by us or the city itself, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the second one is RFPs for public companies to operate them?
No, to own and operate. Go ahead, sir.
Sorry,
That's correct. So we would issue an RFP to allow a private company to come in and own, install, and operate them, and I guess kind of in a partnership with GWP.
Why would we do that? I mean, why those two options? Why not do it ourselves and earn the money or pass it on to private company if they do it more efficiently? Why?
Yeah, so the EV charging industry is pretty early on in its development, and what we have experienced is more downtime than what we would want. Owning and operating and contracting through somebody else to manage the networking. And so if we were to have a third party come in and own and operate, their revenues would be the incentive to keep the uptime up more consistently.
I see. Okay. I guess we're exploring options the
Yes,
way I
sir.
see it. Let's see what becomes more effective, efficient, or
Could
such.
you put this slide showing public and private? You know the slide number, Brian?
Slide 14.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, as you can see, we've been doing this full bore, and we only have 78. And people are out there seeing market opportunities, and they have 193. So we think it's, we do very well selling electricity, providing infrastructure, but to say that we're going to own every charger in the city is doing a disservice to our residents who need chargers. So I think we're going to do both. We're going to do our own, but we're also going to encourage and facilitate and invite people to put chargers in Glendale where they're needed.
No, that's a very good and valid reason, and it's something that it's important that the public gets to know about it too. It's not like, so that's it. So I don't have any other questions, but I do want to thank you. This was a very good report, and more importantly, it's good we are getting our hands on this information, and we're getting adept in understanding the need and how we can reach and provide what our public needs. Obviously, cars are becoming more, electric cars are becoming more adopted, and we are trying to do our best to provide the service. So this is very good institutional knowledge that we are building here, and I commend you on it and continue in that regards.
Commissioner Lowry?
Great presentation, Brian. Thank you very much. I just have one question, and I was looking at those slides, and as far as where, prospective chargers could go, and I noticed a couple of them were Trader Joe's, and another one was Kenneth Village, which is where, right by my house. All those areas, parking is really a problem. I mean, it's really, not all the time, but, during the busy hours. And I'm just wondering what, how you would be dealing with that as far as selecting the locations and because I'm sure, people are going to get real unhappy if they finally see that parking space and they get in there and they finally wiggle in and get out and there's an EV charger there and they don't have an EV, so I'm just wondering what are you guys' thoughts or criteria on selection?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Lowry. That's a very valid point. I've had a number of conversations with my peers in the parking management division of Public Works about that, and it has in a sense kind of uprooted the parking industry for that very reason. So community outreach is number one. In any of these areas, every neighborhood's a little bit different and has different desires for EV infrastructure, and so that'll be at the forefront of our decision making in exploring the needs of the community and partnering with the businesses in those areas to ensure that we get their input before moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And would the spaces be restricted to EV only, or is it possible just to have an EV charger there and it can be used if the space is vacant? I mean, it's not like it's I'm just questioning, could it be like something other than like handicap parking where you can only park there if you're handicapped?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a variety of solutions to address those concerns. Some EV chargers have, they don't charge for kilowatt hour, they charge for parking. So if you're there an extended amount of time, you pay more the longer you're there for parking. So there's a lot of different options that we could implement in different, as needed at different areas.
Yeah.
I think we got to continue to be open to those different varieties of options.
Yeah. Another thing that I just wanted to mention as an informational point is some of these chargers are not just chargers. They're large displays with advertising on them, and people are approaching shopping center owners, and companies are approaching shopping center owners and say, we'll put this in for free, and we'll give you a cut of what we make off the advertising. And some of the charging companies already have agreements, and the advertising is already sold. So that's another reason why it may or may not make sense for the city to get involved in that But there's a lot of incentive, to get these things in, just, with the advertising.
Thank you.
So I think there was a chart you had that showed the relative impact of the level 2 chargers and the level 3 chargers. And I think that's the whole story here. I think you kind of buried the lead. It's that the level 3 chargers vastly outperform the level 2 chargers in terms of their utility and function, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that I think is the headline here. That's the takeaway. And I think before we go ahead with installing any more level 2 chargers, we need to come back to that idea. Is it a good idea to keep installing more level 2 chargers if the level 3s are so much more effective, right?
Yep.
I think there maybe is some confusion. Like we should think about what is our strategy? What are we trying to achieve? What's GWP's role here? And I think from my experience having owned EVs for over a decade, if you can charge at home or you can charge at work, that's where you charge. Like the role of public charging is not because you're going to the grocery store and there happens to be a charger and you plug in. I think public charging should be for people who can't charge at home or at work. And we should try to incentivize everyone who can charge at home or at work to do that. And we focus our public charging on people who can't charge at home or at work. Does that kind of make sense with what you've seen, as the best practices?
Yeah, it definitely does. Yep.
And I think that's why we don't see level 2 chargers being so useful, because unless there's a level 2 charger at your house or at your office, it just takes way too damn long for your car to charge. You finished your shopping, you're ready to go home, and your car's only got 10 miles of range in it. So
Right.
they're kind of useless for public charging unless you're at the airport for a week or you're somewhere for a long time. So I think the horse is out of the barn on some of these projects, but I would suggest that we take a real strong look at stopping any projects that aren't already shovels in the ground to install level 2 chargers and just reassess. Is it worth doing? Because it seems like one level 3 charger is about as effective as 10 or 20 level 2 chargers. And I know the requirements are different for sites. They pull a lot more power. So it's not a one-to-one comparison, but if we're spending public money, I have a hard time condoning spending it on level 2 chargers that are only going to be kind of marginally useful. So I don't know if you guys have comments about that.
We're doing both. And the reason is you cannot put a level 3 on curbside. And to do level 3, I don't have the exact number, but for the level 3s that we've done, $500,000, how much do they cost?
Well, the total construction for one level 3 will be about 50 to 100,000.
That's just for the charger. But to bring the infrastructure, which you have infrastructure needs, it's in addition to that, right?
That's correct.
So you have 480 volt, about 7, Dan will tell you, how many kilowatts? For a DC fast charger?
Level 3 is 350, 250 kilowatts. 250 to 350 kilowatts.
So you have a
Huge transfer.
Yeah, no,
transformer.
it's a big deal. And when you
So-
see them like in the Ralph's parking lot on, where's that, Colorado and Verdugo, there's like a small shipping container sized cabinet of electronics and 4 or 5 stalls, right? So it's not like a onesie twosie thing.
So
But-
our strategy of engaging private entities to make that investment, to charge what they need to get, to have a business model, to locate it where their market research says it's needed, that's exactly what this is for, to get more level 3 in. The curbside are on public right-of-way. Are they utilized in other places where they have them? I think they're appreciated and utilized.
Yeah, so
And
Broadview was one of
we're in a
those.
position to do that with very little infrastructure. You can do the curbside. So to do both. We want both.
Yeah, I recognize there's definitely a visibility benefit of it being curbside, but I think there's some limited utility there, and we can do both, but I think our chips should be on fast charging. And it doesn't mean we have to build it, we have to spend the money. We can do it through this partnership model, but just the time and how EV drivers spend their time is you would rather drive 10 minutes to go to a fast charger that can charge your car in 20 or 30 minutes and then drive home than park for 5 hours somewhere that's not your house, right? And I think fundamentally that's kind of the time economics of this, that the fast chargers are just much more effective, so.
Another reason we support them is for inclusion and accessibility for individuals that don't have garages, that don't have a means to have their own home charger.
Yeah.
So it's more in the
That's
lines
exactly what I'm saying is
gas station, yes.
I think we can serve people who can't charge at home better
Right.
with a smaller number of fast chargers than with a bigger number of level 2 chargers, right?
It's point well taken and agreed.
Okay, good.
May I add one to this discussion? I know in all these curbside projects that you showed them near some sort of a market, which is people come in, go out, they don't stay late. But I think curbside project of level 2 would be very beneficial next to apartment buildings, right? Where people are going to park their car, go into their house for the whole night and come back in the morning. That's when their car gets charged. And usually these are the people who do not have available charging stations either in their apartment building because the apartment owner didn't put it and they can't do anything about it. So at least they could have that access. So while I agree probably level 3 is gets more bang for the buck, but we got to serve a public who does not have access to that. They don't work for the city, so they can't just come and park here. But also just to keep in mind, in the pictures you show for level 2 parking, don't put them next to parking lots, next to shopping centers all the time. Put them in next to apartment buildings as well, so that when you're looking at them, you're not just thinking about shopping and you're going there for half an hour to get your grocery and get out. You put a picture of an apartment building, they'll know people are living in that. They're going to park there the whole night and come in the morning and go to work, and they could benefit from that. So that's my comment about level 2.
Yeah, I think homes and offices for sure. I think unless I know as an EV owner, I can always park in that spot when I need to charge my car, it's not that valuable. Because when your car is out of juice, you need to charge it. And if you don't have certainty that that spot and that charger are available, it's kind of useless, right? And I mean, we're in the reliability business as a utility, and that's what EV drivers need. So I think even in that case, if you're coming home and there's a curbside charger in front of your apartment building, someone else is parked there, it's useless, right? So I think that's another reason why. We talked about the efficient use of parking spaces. Level 2s are going to chew up a lot more parking spaces than level 3s. So anyway, I don't need to belabor the point. I think, I've made my point. So I want to just address some of the other things in your report. What's the best metric? You had, a number of figures up there, and I like that this is so data-driven, and I think we have a lot of data here we can pull from. The number of ports we have out there, I don't know if that's the right thing, the amount of uptime. I would suggest that the right metric we use is how many electric miles do we enable with our publicly funded infrastructure, right? And that's a way to get a normalization between the impact of a fast charger, level 3, versus a slow charger. Is that something we could kind of recalculate based on the usage, based on the charging speed, and come up with some methodology there? Because I think ultimately that's what we're trying to drive, is displacing gasoline and displacing the fossil fuel emissions. So any ideas about how we could kind of normalize that as a metric?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of data, and it's always fun to crunch data, right? Miles driven per kilowatt hour. There's industry standards that dictate what that is, and I think it's improving as technology gets better, battery technology gets better. But I think yes, definitely we can implement that as well.
Oh, great. I think that would be awesome. Addressing the gap between the number of EVs that are registered in Glendale and the growth there is phenomenal. I was very surprised that there's that many. And then the low number of people who are taking advantage of our rebates. Why aren't people doing this? It's free money. If you buy a car, most of those people are going to charge it at home. We're paying for their charger, but they're just not filling out the paperwork. Like, what is the reason?
Yeah. So one thing that we've looked at, and I think it's an important statistic, is we have a total of 479 rebates that have given out to residential. Most of those are single. We have some residents that have adopted a couple more than one charger. most of those we're going to assume are in single-family residences in which those people own, right? We have about, these are rough numbers, but we have about 25,000 total single-family homes. If we assume that all of those are owned by the people who live on them, then that's the number that we might target, right? Conversely, we have about 50,000, I believe, multifamily homes. And so it's most likely that a person who owns an EV that lives in a multifamily home doesn't have the ability to take advantage of the rebate because it's not their property to install the rebate. Now, we do have commercial. Some of the commercial accounts go to large residential apartment complexes, and that's a small percentage. But yeah, I think targeting the single-family homes is where the effort needs to be.
And I don't want to throw shade at anybody here, but we're doing a really bad job of giving away money here. And I think that's something we should look at. Maybe we're just doing it wrong. Maybe instead of it being on the GWP website, we should be putting posters at car dealerships. Or, if we want people to take advantage of these rebates, and I think we do, it just boggles my mind that people aren't taking advantage of this. I think it's because they don't know about it. Because if somebody told you, congratulations on your new electric car, the city wants to give you $600 to pay for your charger, it's a pretty easy decision, I think. So,
agreed.
Okay. So let's try and figure out how to close that gap. I think that would be something we can do. And I think that's important because as we start to manage peak load, controlling EV charging during our hottest summer peaks is one of the great low-hanging fruit. And if we are paying for people's chargers, we can put some strings on it and say, yeah, here's $600 for a free charger, here's $1,000 for a charger, but when it gets really hot in August, we might shut it off remotely. Are you okay with that? Yeah. And people will probably sign away that right to get the free charger, and then we'll have that as a dispatchable DER that we can actually count on. So exactly. I think that's part of the long game and how all these things kind of knit together. So is the data we get from the state, you showed it at the zip code level, is that as precise as we get as far as where the EVs are in Glendale?
I mean, it's precise as far as the registrations are, as long as the registrations are accurate. So,
but we don't get addresses for car registrations.
I think we can get addresses. Yes.
Okay. Because I think there is also an impact here as the number of EVs takes off. We're going to see strains on our distribution grid, especially because they're not being purchased and located, evenly across the city. Like I know in my little cul-de-sac of 6 houses, there's probably 5 EVs in driveways, and that's another 5 houses worth of load on that transformer. Right. I'm really worried that that's going to be the problem we run into. That with a backlog of transformer repairs and long lead times, we're going to be stressing out our transformers because we have lots of people buying EVs, and we're encouraging them to do that. But we need to have a way to manage their charging so they're not all plugging in at the same time. I'm aware of some software applications that can map, that can identify EV locations based on the 240 volt signal, that can map those onto our distribution grid topology and give us perfect visibility on where the cars are, which transformers they're on, and give us the ability to kind of manage that charging load remotely. I think that's something that would be really useful for us to look into. And I'd be happy to pass along recommendation. They've offered to do free pilot projects for us. We've applied for grant applications. I think we need to find a way to kind of get some of that technology, or maybe we have it through some other tool. But I think that level of visibility is what we need to really own this. So,
yep. Agreed.
Okay. And yeah, I think that's my soapbox on this one. So, all right. I care a lot about EVs. So, and we should kick butt on this. Everything's moving in the right direction. So, anyone else have anything to add?
I do. Brian, it feels to me like we're missing it on the multifamily. I mean, you said there's like 50,000 households that are living in multifamily. So let's say that's 100,000 people. So that's almost half the population of the city. And it doesn't seem like there's very good penetration as far as getting chargers for those people living in multifamily. And I think it's a bit of an equity issue. You know, here again, we're giving somebody a rebate, for their home to do their charger, but the person in the multifamily, because they're paying a utility bill, but they don't own their property. And my question is, how do we boost that? I mean, I know we're dealing with, an owner that owns the property, but there still should be a way that we can incentivize those owners, because it's, for somebody who's got an EV, you're looking around and you got to find an apartment building that's got an EV charger. I mean, that's what I would do if I was looking around. And it can be a competitive thing for those owners, but I don't think we can ignore, this segment just because it's difficult to do because they're renting.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowry. If we can go to slide 14. I'll highlight that our current EV infrastructure in the middle is in the downtown area, which is mostly populated with multifamily residences. I do have another graphic, it's not on this presentation, that overlays this same information on the Cal Enviro screen map. And if you were to look at that map, the area that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure is the green area of the map that, and then the section that has most of that infrastructure is the red area. So those are the populations that are more susceptible to pollution and have typically like a lower socioeconomic status. And so the infrastructure up to this point has been targeting the lower income areas, and including the areas that are more densely populated with multifamily. But we are also looking to expand that out to other areas of the city. But equity is definitely at the forefront of our decision making.
Okay. And the incentives for people in apartments are basically the same as single family homes?
Yes.
As far as
And maybe the question is, should our approach to help people who don't own their own homes get electric cars, is it to give them better public charging opportunities so that it doesn't matter that they can't charge at home, or to help give them the ability to charge at their rental home? What do you think is the better way to skin that?
I believe that increasing the rebate across people who would invest in that infrastructure at their own home relieves the public infrastructure to the ones that really need it, who can't install it. So I think it's a combination, as Manny had alluded to. We're going to do both. I think there's value in installing level 2s in different areas. I'll note that most of the areas that we are proposing they're not only in just shopping areas, but they are adjacent to multifamily areas as well. And so you will see, there's a lot of community members that live close here that charge here at the Civic Center or charge at the City Hall. Same with Pacific Park. There's a lot of community members there that charge at the Pacific Park EVSE infrastructure. So I think it's not just one solution. I think it's a combination. So increasing that, the rebate with homeowners, like I said, frees up some of the public infrastructure for those who don't have that infrastructure. So increasing both, I think, is good.
Maybe we can look at a different kind of rebate program that's for multifamily property owners that would kind of pay their costs to extend this for their residents. There's like a principal agent problem there, where the person who owns the car and wants to charge it isn't in charge of their electric bill or their electric meter, right? So maybe that's an idea. You could look at some options and see if there are other cities that have come up with ways to help encourage multifamily owners to invest in this as a way to make their properties more attractive for tenants as a competitive advantage. Maybe it's worth spending 10 grand for a multifamily building instead of 600 or 700 for a single family dwelling.
Yeah.
Frankly, based on the numbers, it doesn't seem like the single family dwellings need our help to install chargers, because they're doing it anyway without the rebates. So maybe we should focus all of our efforts towards multifamily.
Good point.
It seems to me that on the multifamily, you can put a level 2 in, and the person comes home and they, as Roland was saying, they park their car there for the whole night. And that gives us the opportunity to start charging that car at midnight or whatever is best for the utility. I just think that the level twos and the multifamilies is a great application. And it's, from a installation standpoint, it's easy. The level threes, as you say, are, I mean, it's really tough to get that infrastructure.
As part of our building standards, the new installations do have electric vehicle charging. And I'll ask this question, I think I know the answer, but the funding for this publicly owned infrastructure comes from LCFS?
Yes, sir.
So LCFS is a separate fund. It does not come from the non-participants, like solar does, but electric vehicle doesn't. So we don't take ratepayer money. And but having said that, we want to give access to the multifamily either through publicly available charging or possibly an incentive where we can bundle. How much is it per charger? 600? How much do we pay?
Yes, 600, $5.99.
So if a building owner puts in 4, then you get 2,400, and that may pay for the trenching to get the, you know, there are costs other than the charger. You got to get the power from the panel to the parking lot, which usually isn't there. But maybe a bundling or something like that. We could look at that. But point well taken. We do want to serve all of our residents.
That's right.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, I think that that concludes 6D, unless there's anything else you wanted to add?
I will add something. So we do have the commercial EV charging station rebate. I think I mentioned that, but to go into further detail, I'm just going to read this so the information is straightforward. This program provides rebates to commercial and multifamily building customers who install electric vehicle charging stations at their property. Base rebates are the lesser of $50,000 or 50% of the total project cost. So customers who meet one of the following criteria are eligible to receive the lesser of $75,000 or 75% of the total project cost. And there's a couple qualifications, but we do have, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but we do have roughly 100, almost 200 commercial charging stations that have been funded through this project. And a lot of those are part of multifamily residences. Some of them are at DreamWorks, but some of them are also on big apartment complexes on Glendale. I think there's a couple on Howard, but that does address some of those points that you were making.
Great, yeah, and maybe push more on getting those out and let the single-family homeowners, you know, be apathetic about their rebates if they want to. Okay, well, thank you very much for that report.
Yep, thank you.
So looping back, we're coming back up to item 5A. And we do have a public comment on that. Ms. Gish, would you like to wait until after the presentation? No, I can't. Okay, sure. Please.
President Fay, if we could have the item read into the record, please, and then there's a recusal, and then Ms. Gish can go ahead and make her comments.
And for the record, Commissioner Peterson is not here.
Go ahead and read the item into the record.
Item 5, action items, plan to increase solar adoption and develop additional distribution energy resources.
Commissioner Lowry,
I need to recuse.
state the reason, please.
I have a conflict with Willdan. Willdan is the parent company of E3.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll take Ms. Gish's comment, and then we can move to the presentation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it isn't the other order. Thank you for letting me speak. My overriding comment on the E3 draft report is that they did not do what they were supposed to do and create a plan for achieving 10% customer solar and 10% customer storage with an alternative where the storage could be partially on GWP-controlled sites. They were also supposed to develop additional demand management measures with a total peak dispatchable and peak load reducing capacity of 100 megawatts. They were supposed to have a plan to get to these numbers by 2027, or to say when they could. Instead, they said it was not feasible to meet any of the goals except solar by 2030, not even giving dates for the other goals. And they did not look at the benefits of solar and storage together, whether customer-owned or utility-owned storage, or vehicle-to-grid storage, or community solar and storage, in reducing the costs for imports, transmission costs, spot market prices like we had to pay this year, maintenance for Grayson, and other costs. The people having solar reduce the midday peak, and if paired with storage, would reduce the 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. peak as well. E3's big recommendation is to switch to net billing tariff, or NBT. So on the slide here that was done by Ohm Analytics, it shows new permit issuance for solar by year. In April of 2023, about where I put the arrow, NBT started for the 3 big independently owned utilities, which supply electricity to 75% of all customers in California. But I think this chart is for everybody, not just for the ones supplied by the IOUs. One can see that there was considerable growth in new solar from 2020 to 2021, orange line to gray line, and from 2021 to 2022, gray line to yellow line. But the 2024 green line is less than both 2021 and 2022. So instead of increasing solar, E3's recommendation will dramatically reduce new customer-owned solar. GWP in their presentation is asking this commission to endorse the E3 study findings. The motion that GWP suggests that you vote for is to, quote, accept the findings, unquote, of the E3 study. I urge you to do neither and figure out how to get a real plan to increase solar and storage adoption, as well as increase demand management. I have no problem with GWP's solar on city-owned buildings and its proposed power purchase agreements, but they are pretty modest numbers. There is no number for the proposed energy efficiency in the draft charts or in the charts that I saw in the packet. With the climate crisis and the upcoming deadlines to switch to more clean energy, there should be an urgency to make progress, but I don't see it. E3 suggestions will just make it worse.
Thank you for your comments, and thank you for hanging around as we had to change the order of the meeting. Do we have a presentation from staff or from the consultant?
Yes, our Clean Energy Officer will be making the presentation. And our Assistant General Manager in charge of Power will also have some remarks.
And something that Mr. Robledo mentioned earlier about the net billing tariff change, just to be clear, we're not no one's recommending that we change the current net metering policy?
The current recommendation is to make no change at this time. We do accept the fact that it's all over the Public Utilities Commission that the current situation does benefit participants at the expense of non-participants. But in light of continuing our trend to adoption to 60 megawatts, we don't feel it's necessary to make that change at this time.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to have that on the record because the speaker mentioned it. So.
Right.
Good evening, President Fay, members of the Commission. Scott Mellon, Assistant General Manager, Power Management. So a month ago, we came to you and gave you the first look at the study that E3 provided, and kind of first look at what our approach would be to meet some of the internal goals that Council had requested, and in general what the community is looking for. About a little after a week, a little bit more than a week after that, we issued the full study in draft form for everyone to review. So essentially, everyone's had a little over 3 weeks to review it. We recognized that there was quite a bit of information in there, and we also recognize that there's a fair amount to consume and understand. We hope that the amount of time that we provided for the commissioners and community members who received copies of that, that they had an opportunity to consume it, to understand it a little bit better. Tonight we're going to kind of do a recap of what we did a month ago and kind of bring up to you and look for your insights and look for your suggestions in that, in the hope that we will then be able to go to council and address the very contentious topics that are in the findings. I would like to say, just in a little bit of clarity, the findings in this study are, I can't say irrefutable. I will say people are going to attempt to refute it. They are based in fact. It's easy to find the information. It's very tough to say that it's one, simple to digest, but two, that we're out to get anyone. We're not. We are very concerned about the citizenry of Glendale and how they're going to be taking this information and the impact of how we're going to influence solar adoption in the city. One of the topics that was brought up was that we had no conversations about storage, battery storage in there. And that's because the incredibly high cost of implementing storage and attempting to incentivize it. We will cover some of those topics, but I think we're going to do, Mr. Cutter is on the WebEx. He's going to be presenting from afar, and he will be able to answer questions, so feel free to ask questions after his presentation, followed by Ms. Saloyan, our Clean Energy Officer. She'll be kicking it up after that. So appreciate your time.
Can I steer Mr. Cutter maybe to incorporate in your remarks a couple of topics that were in the full report that were not presented to us last time? The full report touches on the local potential for solar at parking lots and ground mount locations, so other larger scale solar projects potentially in the city of Glendale. Estimating the potential for ELCC from distributed energy resources. Maybe that includes things like vehicle to grid for electric cars, and also the role of community solar for apartment dwellers and low medium income residents who are not able to access behind the meter rooftop solar on their own. If you're able to touch on those in your comments, I'll leave that to you to figure out the best way to do that.
All right. Eric, go ahead and kick it off. Thank you.
Okay, great. And you're able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Someone is sharing the slides, or am I?
Yes, we can see the slides, and we will move ahead as you recommend to slide numbers. So just give us a slide number reference, and we'll jump for you.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. All right. All right. Thank you. I am sorry I'm not there in person. I'm joining you remotely from Boston, and presented a much longer deck to you three weeks ago. And here to give a brief summary and then be available to answer questions. So if we go to slide 2, I think we're all aware we were hired to evaluate the feasibility of 2 goals, achieving 10% solar and storage adoption by 2027, and the feasibility of achieving 100 megawatts of dispatchable peak load reduction by the same date. We proceeded in 3 phases under our scope of work, developing a plan to meet the goal, and we'll discuss this in the next couple of slides, evaluating the dispatchable reduction potential, and then finally concluding with a cost-benefit analysis of the scenarios analyzed. So the next slide really is jumping to the conclusion. Now these, again, are presenting standard cost tests that were developed by the state of California 20 years ago and are commonly used across the country to evaluate DSM programs. They are a ratio of benefit over cost from different perspectives, and above 1.0 indicates a positive test, that is greater benefits, and below 1.0 is a negative result. We start here with the participant cost test. Is it economic for the customer to adopt solar or solar and storage under these different scenarios? And the main difference between the scenarios here are scenario 1 and scenario 4, which are continuing a current NEM policy, and scenario 4 with some additional incentives to really, and that was our scenario, really trying to do our best to meet a 10% goal and see what we thought we could achieve. Scenario 2 and scenario 3 are the scenarios with a net billing tariff that reduces the cost shift as compared to net energy metering. So you see, of course, under continuing NEM scenarios, the customer benefit cost ratio is 3 as compared to closer to 2 under the net billing tariff. Last meeting asked about payback periods, and these relate, it's going to differ customer by customer, but roughly 5-year payback period for the net billing tariff options, and approximately a 4-year payback period for the scenario 1 and scenario 4. And both of those are quite healthy compared to what was considered a payback period for a viable solar market of about 9 years in the CPUC proceeding that was looking at this issue. The next column is showing the societal cost test, which is the benefits to the state or the region as a whole, including, in this case, environmental benefits of greenhouse gas emissions, and the avoided costs to Glendale Water and Power of procuring and delivering energy to its customers. And here we thought it was
Excuse me,
most
Mr.
notable
Cutter.
that continuing.
I'm sorry to jump
Yes.
in. We had a comment from Mr. Robledo.
Yeah, would you please explain what a benefit to cost ratio means? What these represent?
And while you're explaining the methodology, could you clarify the red numbers in the right-hand column? Is a larger absolute value good or better or worse? Are we, would it be worse if these numbers were negative, or, help explain the difference between a 0 and a 1 in this case?
Sure. So it started out as these are benefit cost ratios. So 1.0 means your benefits are exactly equal to your costs. Above 1 means your benefits are greater than your costs, and a larger absolute number is better. We don't typically have a negative result in these cost test ratios. So on the far right is our ratepayer impact measure. Those are all below 1, means they're all costs exceeding the benefits. And a lower number, like the 0.2, is a worse result than the 0.4. Trying to think how else to clarify. So,
Thank you. Go ahead and continue. Sorry.
So for the example of the societal cost test, we're saying the benefits in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction, energy savings, some capacity savings, those benefits are 2 times greater than the cost of installing the solar. On the ratepayer impact measure, the reverse is true. So we're seeing under NEM, you're having the lowest result, which means the biggest cost shift, and the lowest ratio of benefits to cost, as compared to our scenario 2 and scenario 3, which are net billing tariff scenarios. Let me go ahead and move this over here. Yeah, let me continue and take questions if there any remain.
Okay, I think we're all good on slide 3 if you want to continue.
3, okay. Yeah, so moving on to slide 4. This is showing that another view of that ratepayer impact measure. So those were all below 1.0 or negative results. And those are resulting in this chart of ratepayer costs that are increasing over time. And these are unrecovered revenues from the bill savings of customers who have installed solar that now have to be recovered from all the remaining customers. And you'll see two things. The cost shift, or the net ratepayer cost, is increasing over time, and it continues long after 2030 and continues to increase, and increase more dramatically for the two scenarios under net energy metering. And net billing tariff reduces the cost shift, but certainly does not eliminate it. So it helps reduce the problem, but does not eliminate it. What's also shown in this chart, I guess essentially that the solar adoption is increasing over time. So even though the payback is lower under the net billing tariff, we're still seeing an increase month over month in adoption of solar in the state of the whole, and we project similar for Glendale, that we would see continued growth in solar over time without any upfront incentives or other strong incentives, simply with the payback of about 4 years or 5 years offered under the net billing tariff scenario. Okay, let's go. The next two slides are our findings. So slide 5. And so I understand we were at our scope, and a goal for the city and for the council was to find a way to achieve 10% customer solar adoption. Now, of course, this goal was set by the city council before any study was done on whether it's feasible. The E3 report, to my knowledge, is the first detailed study of the literal physical capacity to install solar in the city of Glendale and whether that is economic. And I guess I'm going to stand up and stand by our finding that looking at the rooftops and the parking lots and all the available space and economics, that a 10% customer adoption is simply not feasible by 2027 and is theoretically feasible by 2030. But this is our important second caveat, that the city council set a goal to achieve customer adoption of solar and storage. Glendale Water and Power has a responsibility to balance that goal against two other objectives of providing energy at the least possible cost to all of its customers and ensuring that the programs it's promoting for customers to adopt solar and storage are providing benefits to the grid and the community, not only to the customers adopting solar. So we did not find a way, and this is absolutely consistent with other utilities and states, to promote solar adoption by homeowners that is not shifting significant cost to other ratepayers, and felt it was important to bring that to this commission and to the city council to really understand the implications of achieving the 10% goal, even at a later date. And I've been working in DER, distributed energy resources, my whole career. And it is sad to say achieving 10% storage adoption is simply not feasible anytime in the near future, given the payback to customers and the cost of storage. And that's a big part of why it will be difficult also for the city to achieve its goal of 100 megawatts of reliable peak load reduction, either through flexible loads or dispatchable distributed energy resources. So these all led to our recommendations to think of the goal in terms of megawatts of installed capacity rather than percentage of customers, and look at the full picture of how customer-owned solar and storage potential and economics compares to community solar and storage and to utility scale solar and storage. And with a study of those, all three of those types of resources, have a more informed integrated resource plan with specific targets for each resource type. We go to the next slide. This is really digging into the finding that achieving 10% solar adoption will result in a projected cost of 23 to 45 million to GWP ratepayers over the period of 2024 to 2027. This would result in an increase of 6 to 11% that would be predominantly borne or predominantly impact low to moderate income customers in terms of their energy burden as a percentage of their total income, with a monthly bill increase of $4 to $6 a month. And I will note, related to the last presentation, that represents an increase in the cost of charging your EV. So these rate increases driven by customer solar adoption do make it less economic at the margin for customers to adopt electric vehicles. I also wanted to really be clear that historically in Glendale, 85% of solar adoption is by single family homes. 85%, yeah. And 90% of the adoption is by households above the median income. So there is really a very dramatic disproportionate impact on the benefits going to the wealthier single-family homeowners and burdening lower to moderate income customers, be they single-family homeowners or renters. I also want to be very clear that the rate of solar adoption after the net billing tariff was implemented in California for the investor-owned utilities, that is, the rate of growth in solar adoption declined. The percentage increase, there still continues to be a percentage increase growth month over month. We're getting more solar adoption, and we're getting more megawatts in absolute terms as well, in number of customers in megawatts month over month. So the growth in solar in California has continued to be strong. It's slowed, but it continues to be strong and growing after the implementation of the net billing tariff, which is, now I understand this is not being put before the commission tonight, but it's why we, as a firm at E3, look at net energy metering. We do strongly recommend considering a net billing tariff to reduce the cost shift, considering also implementing non-bypassable charges or fixed customer charges for all customers that can also help reduce the cost shift. And of course, making either of these changes requires GWP to consider the cost and feasibility of making those the necessary updates to its billing and metering system, which is a cost that would need to be considered. Okay, so that covers my prepared slides and remarks. Let me see if I can quickly cover some of the questions you asked. On the first one, let me dig that up so I can find that and get back to you with a more precise number. So we did study the potential for community solar and ground mounted in terms of megawatts and locations.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to get into the particular numbers because we're not taking action on that today, but I think part of what's been lost in this study is that the recommendations kind of land with a thud, in that the community that pushed this study and the council who asked for it asked for a certain thing, and you had the unfortunate job of coming back to say, I'm sorry, that's just not possible. And I think a lot of people stopped reading at that point. But I think there's been a lot of good work done in this study that does show there is opportunity, maybe not at the level the council asked for, but there is opportunity for ground mount solar. There is opportunity for parking lots. I'm hoping we can just maybe touch on that, if not numerically, conceptually, to describe what we can do, because the overall tone so far of this has been very negative, that no, we can't deliver on that goal. But I think if we can help show people what we can do, that will help kind of put this in a more productive light.
Very good. That's a good point. We didn't present tonight, but there's also conclusions in the report that one way to increase the equity of the program, that is, make it more available to those renters, to the lower income customers, is by including what we call community solar, which are larger projects on larger municipal buildings, or as you say, ground-mounted solar over parking lots. I think GWP will be careful to explain that any projects that they are pursuing are on behalf of the community, being a municipal utility. But yes, there's absolutely potential to continue to pursue these projects on municipal buildings and in parking lots, and through what's sometimes called virtual solar programs or other programs, allow renters to enroll in a virtual program to see benefits as if they had installed solar on their roof. So it's both lower cost in terms of installing the system, and it's more equitable in terms of the types of customers who can benefit from solar.
So Eric.
And I think in the next slide decks, you're going to see more details on what GWP is pursuing in this regard.
That's a good transition, Eric. Thank you. This is Scott. So Eric hit the nail on the head as far as description about what it is we do. We are the community. So anything we build is community-based. The work that we're doing with the solar installations, the work we're doing with EV chargers, the work that we're doing, the PPAs that we're looking at, all the things that we're going to talk about in the next presentation, or at least touch on again, is all about trying to reduce the cost impact to the customer. Right? We definitely have the ability to take advantage of space and land that we already own, to build on that wherever it's possible, to beautify, in a lot of cases, the spaces that we are looking at putting solar and EV chargers in. So it's in the community's best interest, it's in our best interest to continue to look at these type of projects, the phase 1 and phase 2 projects that we're already moving on with. And I think that the benefits will bear itself in the cost. Essentially, we can do it less expensive than they can do it, and we actually have access to space. We know how highly concentrated the residents are. We have multifamily homes all over the place. What we don't have is space. So what little space we do have in parks, what little space we do have in parking lots, we can look at that. So I'm going to take that as an opportunity to transition to Ms. Soloyan so she can give her presentation. We'll come back around and have more conversation on this. Great. Thank you.
Good evening, President Fay and Commission members. My name is Ruzan Soloyan, Clean Energy Officer at GWP. As highlighted in ITRI's study, while solar adoption brings significant benefits to societal benefits, it also presents a challenge, especially to ratepayers. California's rooftop solar panels are placing a financial burden on non-solar customers. And as we can see on this chart, it's projected that cost shift will reach $8.5 billion by the end of this year. While GWP recognizes the impact of net energy metering, the transitioning to net billing tariff requires careful planning, preparation, and some transitional changes, and we are not currently prepared or willing to transition to net billing tariff, and that will help our customers to continue adopt solar at our current trends. However, GWP is ready to design and implement some new programs and bring those programs to the community to respond to the City Council's goals to increase distributed generation production and developing additional demand management measures. The first program that we propose to design and implement is the In-System Power Purchase Agreements program that will offer guaranteed price for renewable energy generation and providing long-term compensation for producers. Unlike net energy metering, which is limited to only on-site energy use, in-system power purchase agreements enable developers to fully utilize their solar potential on properties like carports, parking canopies that aren't eligible for net energy metering. And a well-structured in-system power purchase agreements can significantly help Glendale in its clean energy initiatives while providing the economic certainty to developers and energy producers that they need. The second program that we propose to design and implement is the Comprehensive Residential Energy Efficiency Rebates Program that will provide rebates for additional energy efficiency measures, and this will help us to further increase adoption of distributed energy resources in Glendale and reduce peak energy demand. The third program that we propose is the new Comprehensive Energy and Water Assessments, Direct Installations, and Concierge Services program that will offer comprehensive energy water assessments and installations of various energy water measures to customers, which will help again to reduce energy demand and result in deeper energy water savings. ITRI concluded that it won't be feasible to meet the City Council's goal by 2027, and that all programs they analyzed from scenario 1 to 4 will result in rate increases. However, we want to mention that the total customer-owned solar systems currently account for 3.5% and 29.3 megawatts of capacity. With current solar adoption trend and additional solar capacity from utility-owned solar and in-system power purchase agreements, staff projects that we will have a total solar capacity of 60 megawatts by 2030. With this, GWP staff recommends that the GWP Commission endorse the ITRI study findings on GWP's plan to increase solar adoption and develop additional distributed resources for council approval as they reveal significant ratepayer impacts that deem the analyzed initiatives not feasible. Staff also recommends that the GWP Commission endorse for City Council approval those 3 programs that we presented, including in-system solar power purchase agreements program, comprehensive energy efficiency rebate program, comprehensive energy water assessments, installations, and concierge services program. Staff will also recommend that GWP Commission endorse the amendment to Resolution 22-125 for council approval, which includes removing the target of achieving a minimum total peak dispatchable and peak load reducing capacity of 100 megawatt and customer solar adoption target of 10% by December 31st, 2027, and revise those goals by 60 megawatt of solar generating capacity by 2030 to mitigate feasibility concerns and potential rate increases. This concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, commissioners?
I did have some questions. For example, slide 5 that that Eric was presenting, if we can go back to that slide. sorry, 4 maybe? Slide 4, sorry. Yeah, that one, okay. So I'm looking at this, and this is the cost shifting is from what I'm understanding. So under scenario 2, S2, by 2054, each year, there's a cost shift of 40 million from one group to everybody else. Is that what I'm understanding? Or is this the accumulation over the whole number of years?
I will let Eric Carter to answer this question. My understanding is that this cumulative number
Okay.
from 2024 to 2054. Eric, are you there?
Yeah, can you back on?
We can hear you, Eric. Go ahead.
Okay, great. No, so each dot is, you're understanding correctly, is the annual cost shift. So it is increasing each year, the cost shift. And so you are, sorry, I forget. Yes, scenario 2 would result in 2054, an annual cost shift in that year alone of $40 million to other ratepayers.
So that year alone, there's going to be a shift
Nominal
of
dollars.
40 million, just that year we're talking. Is that correct?
Just that year, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so this
just
is
that
not
year.
the accumulation over the whole period. It's just that year. If we adopt the cheapest one, or recommend, by 2054, there's a 40 million each year being shifted to other groups who can't afford to put solar in the first place. In short.
Correct.
Okay. That was my question. I just wanted a clear understanding of it. Currently, thank you, Eric. That was all of it for you. Sorry to get you back on. Back
No,
to,
I'm here to answer any questions and I'll stay
He's here
on.
to answer questions.
Thank you. Next question is for Mr. Lyon. From what I'm understanding, currently, we only have 3.5% adoption of solar in Glendale of residents. Is that correct?
That's correct. Customer-owned solar is only 3.5%.
All right. And City Council wants 10% by 2027, which is like 3 years from now.
That's correct.
So that's 6.5% increase in the next 3 years. And this 3.5% that we are at this point is from the beginning of time. Okay.
Actually,
Essentially 20 years. How long is it?
I
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, may I comment on that?
Yes.
It's 3.5% of all customers, but if you look at the most likely to have solar, it's approximately 10% of single-family residents, or do you know?
Not positive on that. You
But
remember
for
that?
sure, by the time we get to the 60 megawatts, it'll be more than 10% of single-family residents. It's just that if you try and get 10% of all customers, you have the roofless,
Yeah.
people who can't do it. And then in order to make that up, you have to entice the owners that don't have an economic incentive. And so the goal, we think, is better in a megawatt goal than a percent of customer goal. That's why
Do we have an
changed it.
exact understanding when City Council said 10%, did they mean everybody or 10% of each group of people? What did they mean exactly when they said 10%?
Unfortunately, we had to take it the way it was written in the resolution, and the way we took it was customers, period.
All customers, 10%. Okay. All right.
But they do mention specifically residential in part of the resolution, if I recall correctly. So it definitely leaned more towards the residential, not necessarily the commercial and industrial.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
yeah.
why we're making the suggestion that we should include them also.
The way I see things at this point, and this is just my comments at this point, I don't have a question, is City Council has an objective they want to meet. And I think they're starting a conversation. That's how I see it. And I think between staff, commission, and City Council is to continue a conversation of what can and cannot be done. For example, in my practice, I get people come to me asking me to do something. And I could do it. It'll cost you a whole lot of money, but there's a better way of doing it if you want to listen to it.
Right.
And they usually are receptive because it's going to cost a lot of money. And I think this is what this is a conversation. It's not something city council requested and we said no to it. It's saying, well, we could do it. If money's not an object, anything can be done. Right. Let's have a conversation as to what's the best way of doing it. And I think city council would be receptive when you discuss it that way. So that's what I'm seeing here. This is a conversation on how to get an objective that city council is leading us in the direction, and we like that. We would like to get there.
Yeah.
And so that's my comments for now. I'll allow other commissioners to ask questions and comment.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, that this is part of the conversation or negotiation to figure out how to achieve our clean energy goals and how to improve our independence and resilience and be less dependent on external sources of energy. I think the two presentations we had today about water and energy are essentially the same thing. We are entirely dependent on things beyond our control and beyond our borders in both cases. And I think it behooves us to try to assert more control and more independence over both our water future and our clean energy future. And I think that was why advocates and the city council pushed for this. Local solar and local storage help us achieve that clean energy independence. And I think what the department is suggesting is actually very consistent with that, but just in a different way. Instead of paying a premium for the most expensive kind of local solar on individual residents' rooftops, you're suggesting we do it at a community scale, at carports and larger facilities where we can get the economies of scale that dominate this whole industry. So that makes a lot of sense. And from the storage perspective, we're building a giant battery anyway at Grayson. And that battery will be much more capable than anything we could cobble together from people's, Tesla Powerwalls or home batteries or things like that. So I think we ought to pursue that first and see where that gets us. We might work down the cost curve and at some point need to get those more expensive resources from residents' rooftops and their personal batteries. But at this point, that doesn't make sense, and we should do what makes sense first. So,
Yeah,
Yes,
a quick comment about that. We've done some research, and there are pilot programs where they're doing that, but there's no best practice, utility accepted, utility scale, using someone's Tesla to power the grid. I think the best use of that would be, I've seen vehicle to load, where someone can use their car as an emergency generator for their house. But that's a personal decision. It's not us, pushing a button and turning them off, and then they can't use their car because we took their power. There's a lot of things to work through in that. It is it's possibility, but for Glendale to be the bleeding edge of that, I think it needs to mature a bit before we could commit to that.
Sure.
And as you said, our battery is on the way, and we're going to utilize it, and we're going to see how we can use it, how to make the best of it, and then we could possibly expand that. We have the land to expand more of that at our site, which would be more cost-effective than trying to utilize the batteries of our customers.
and I understand we're not considering or recommending any changes to the current residential solar billing tariff or incentive. We've already taken the upfront incentive down to zero, as I understand it.
Yes.
And people continue to install solar on their roofs. It seems like the solar market is very strong. As a new technology, things start out immature. They need support. They need subsidy. But solar materials prices come down. Electric rates go up. Things become cost effective on their own without as much support from the utility. So I think the payback figures that were shared, that we're still well within what the industry considers a reasonable hurdle rate of solar being a good investment. Getting your money back after 9 years from an asset that has a 20+ year life, that's a reasonable hurdle rate, and we would still be in the 4 to 5 year range. I don't think we're going to be killing the rooftop solar market if we were to make changes like this. So
Yeah.
I'm comfortable supporting the recommendations. I do think it's important how it's messaged, though, because as kind of an outsider who's not in this world 24/7, it seems like the city council asked for something and the answer was no with a slammed door. I think in practice, we're saying there's a different way to accomplish your goal. And I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in how this is communicated. I appreciate that E3 has the integrity to, call out when something is not possible, and I appreciate that they did that and have the math to back it up. I think maybe it's our job to take that techno-economic analysis and kind of massage it a little bit so that it is aligned with the council's intent. I believe it is aligned with the council's intent of making Glendale a cleaner city and a more independent city, and I think we're working towards that. So.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commission? If not, I'd ask for a motion to recommend the staff recommendation.
President Fay, commission members, so you have two motions before you. One is, in essence, is a blank motion. That was just in case if commission decided to recommend something other than what staff is recommending or seeking. The other motion is a motion recommending the 3 programs that Ms. Soloyan covered. However, seeing that slide number 11 also has a recommendation or a request that the commission recommend the city council to amend resolution 22-125. If the commission is so desirous, what we can do is now we can amend the motion that's before you to include that portion as well.
Okay. Would anyone like to move the amended motion?
There's a lot of words there, so to keep up with all the changes. So I don't want to tell city council what to do as a recommendation. Remove the target of achieving minimum peak load of 100. Don't put it in negative terms, saying remove this. Well, I guess that's what they're asking. Maybe suggest 60 megawatt is more possible and for them to consider, as opposed to telling them, maybe revise your thing to a 60 megawatts. Anyways.
Well, I think, so to President Fay's point, our goal was to meet the intent. E3 presented us with findings of their study. They backed it. We looked at that and said, okay, we understand it. We recognize the council has a certain direction that they are asking us to head in. And here's how we think we can do that. One, stay at an M1, even though we know that there is cost shifts associated with that. We will have to look at MBT in the future, and we will most likely have to move to that sooner than later to handle that cost shift, but we recognize we don't want to have a net impact on solar adoption right now. And we recognize that a goal is necessary. And we are recommending the 60 megawatts total of solar penetration throughout as a goal to reach by 2030 because we see that as plausible. We look at the customer adoption rates that are going on right now. We look at the projects that we have going on right now, and we look at the feasibility of the PPAs and the potential there with the commercial and industrial sector. And we really feel like 60 is something we can easily aim for and hope that we can, produce more than that. So to the intent of what the council is, I think we need to capture that in a rewrite of the resolution at the very least. Recommendation for change in the resolution. I'm open to any of the thesaurus of words that you'd like to throw into that spot. I'm comfortable with any of them, but the net impact is change.
Okay, you guys have thought about this, at least the wording, much more than I'm going to be thinking about it in the next 5 minutes and trying to change things. So I will move for a motion to, as was stated in the agenda item, the motion as was stated. Okay. So I move that recommendation. And with regards to the amendments that are being suggested, I move that as well. That's my motion, so I'm moving it.
Thank you. You have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Well, Holder, I have a question for you since you mentioned the kind of sizing the PPAs. It looked like in the stack of how you get to 60, the PPAs is expected to be about 2 megawatts by 2030.
Right. So the reason why we said 2 is because we know for a fact we have about to right now. We wholeheartedly believe we're going to be able to attract others to this, but because it's so new and that's the least of the knowledge base that we have, we didn't want to extend that much further than that. We are definitely looking for more than 2, and in fact expect to issue an RFP looking for people to join into it. We're almost finished with our agreement with one particular vendor who's been helping us along this path, and when we get to that, and we will likely seek to get approval for this one vendor and then issue the RFP right around the same time.
And is it reasonable to think that there might be some kind of snowball effect or momentum to this, that once a price is established of what the department's willing to pay for these kind of privately developed solar projects, that could accelerate and there will be more projects that come forth?
Yes.
To take advantage of that program?
I hope that we'll present a process that other utilities can look at and go, that's how we want to do it. So that's what our aim is.
And what is our process or the steps? It sounds like there's one project that's in negotiations now.
Yes.
How do we go from there to 2 megawatts?
It's 1 vendor, 2 projects. We're looking at, so we issue a term sheet, we develop a term sheet, and we come sit down in the agreement, and we look at obligations. So the key for us with PPAs is it's not deliver when available, it's deliver when we expect. The big benefit with PPAs is that as a utility, we can use those PPAs to plan. If we know what kind of energy is in the system, then we can defer maintenance in certain areas. We can plan for growth in other areas. It allows us the ability to take the fact that this energy is going to be made available on a regular basis and build around it. So that's much different than a FIT program. It's much different than a NEM program. So in that, and the fact that these people who would be interested in doing this are going to be looking at a realistic return on investment. Yes, we do think that it's going to stimulate interest, and that we do think there's going to be growth in that in a very short period of time.
And do you think that any of these PPA solar projects might also include storage locally here in Glendale?
It's possible, but we're not going to push the storage because we have 75 megawatts worth of battery storage in our backyard right now, and we can control that, and we don't have to build any additional controls or infrastructure to support controlling things that are disparate, all over the place.
So the idea kind of is we already have the big battery, now we're looking for more ways to gather electricity to charge our battery.
Right.
Okay.
They would price, if they did battery, they would price it into the rate of the power purchase agreement. So we'd rather pay a lower rate. And comparing power purchase agreement to customer-owned solar, it's in the order of half. So I think it's a benefit to us to do the power purchase agreements versus, there is a place for customer-owned solar, and I put this back up to show that we're at 18 now, we're going to 35. So customer-owned solar, we're at 29 now, we're going to 50. So it will continue, and as Mr. Mellon said, at some point we'll have to revisit the NEM1, but at this point we're not recommending changes to that because we want that trajectory to continue, and that's where most of the 60 megawatts is going to come from.
And at some point when we revisit net energy metering, might time of use rates also be something that's kind of in that policy basket of things we might change about?
Yeah, we're going to use all the tools at our disposal.
That is the difference, is that net billing, it's like for like. You generate when the sun's out, you have to use it when the sun's out. Right now, you can generate when the sun's out and you use it at night, so it makes things fair, and time of use is a part of that.
It makes it more fair.
Sure. Yeah.
Not completely fair.
And I think in some ways it improves the economics of people making the private decision to install batteries,
right,
which maybe moves us towards that goal as well. So, yeah, but it's kind of I guess a good problem to have that batteries don't really make sense in Glendale because the grid is very reliable and our electricity is fairly inexpensive. So it's hard for a battery to compete with that. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we have a motion. Call for a vote.
President Fay, Commission members, just to make sure I'm capturing this correctly. So the motion, the amended motion was to recommend the 3 programs and also without recommending specific words, include staff's recommendation to modify the resolution as council sees fit. I'm not asking the commission to recite the words to be in the motion or the resolution, but I just want to make sure that that's the desire of the commission, to do both things. Did I capture that correctly?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, whatever was in the package of the motion as moved and the last slide item that was indicated.
Contains both
Correct.
items to be included in the motion.
Yes, that was my.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. We'll take a vote on that. All in favor of the motion? Aye.
I think she need to call.
Do we need a roll call vote, or can we do this?
Yes, please, roll call.
Okay.
Roll call. Commissioner, President Fay,
Aye.
Commissioner Kadigian,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jasmine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on our list is the agenda forecast.
Yes, agenda forecast on next meeting for December 2nd is canceled. However, we have scheduled a plan special meeting for January 22nd, 2025.
And just because we had a previous discussion about the timing and frequency of meetings, and it seems there may be some charter requirement or expectation that we meet monthly, what is the logic for canceling the December meeting? Or
we don't have, the report that's going to be ready in January will not be ready in December, so we don't have another item. So the charter says we're supposed to meet monthly, is that what it says?
It's actually the Glendale Municipal Code. It says commission shall hold monthly meetings. Cancellations are deemed acceptable. If there's nothing to report, meetings have been canceled. However, when I reported what the municipal code stated, it's monthly meetings, not, more than once a month or not every other week. So the date isn't specified, or the day of the week isn't specified in the code. It's per commission's desire.
So we do have a regular meeting first Monday of the month, but it's okay to cancel them.
That is
So
correct.
We're proposing to cancel it because the information will be ready in January. We didn't want to wait till February or do something close to New Year's.
And the January meeting is a special meeting because it's not on our regularly scheduled calendar day. Okay.
Now, given that the regular meeting is very close to this, and that the legislative information will be more ripe in March, I would entertain having the meeting in March, and we could possibly do it on the second Tuesday. We can review that.
Yeah, maybe that's a good time to start that new calendar formula.
Second Tuesday in March. We'll check with the other.
Mr. Robledo, second Monday, I believe.
Yeah, second Monday, you're right.
Okay.
The second Monday in March.
Are you guys okay with not having a meeting in December?
Yes.
I believe one of the outstanding things that we had requested and the department was going to report back on was about establishing a set of KPIs. And
Yes.
Is that part of the content for January?
That's part of this January report.
Okay, great. All right, well, with that, I think the agenda forecast looks fine. So we are ready for an adjournment. A motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.